Chapter 11. Questioning Motivation. I already had this discussion with Itsuka-chan and Momo-chan. Him being here is good for him, and I really think it will help him change his ways for the better. So don't go reporting his and my past to the teachers, unless he goes back to bullying people. He's just brash, not a villain. As a white-furred paw presses a button to turn off the microphone, the other raises up a cup of tea. While I tend to not condone bullying, what Mr. Midoriya said is very intriguing. As he swivels his plush leather chair and hops down onto the floor of his office. I wonder how much the other teachers know. The mouse bear pondered. And I thought just changing the curriculum would be the biggest surprise. He chuckled to himself. That shows me for underestimating the current generation. No, this is just the beginning. The next morning, as the students began to file into their homeroom, they knew what today was. It was the first day for utility training. Most of them were confused and excited to see what that meant. Many of them formed little discussion groups to speculate on what that could possibly be. The students who were admitted from that course explained that they had to demonstrate how versatile their quirk could be, or that it could be used in a way beyond combat or rescue that could be deemed heroic. Which when Momo started to pull various objects from using her quirk, such as bandages, radio, and other useful items, it made sense. Not every hero is going to be like All Might or Recovery Girl. This led to them trying to come up with ideas of how to use their quirk in a different way than they had. However, some of the students had taken notice of the current top performer in their class, who demonstrated incredible versatility, clever thinking, and understanding of quirks. Izuku soon found himself surrounded by classmates who wanted his advice, so they could do well in today's lesson. After trying to understand their chatter for help, each talking to him at the same time, he had to get them to calm down somehow. It was done for him when Kirishima smashed his hardened arms together, making a loud noise, getting everyone's attention. Dudes, there is no point in crowding the little man. Kirishima placed himself in between his classmates. At this point, Tokoyami inserted himself into the discussion. Yes, let us politely and calmly ask him for assistance, the bird boy said in a shaming tone. It's not every day that the students get a schooling in school by another student. A few mumbled apologies let Tokoyami know to continue. Midoriya-san, would you please be able to help those of us prepare for our upcoming afternoon class? Izuku had never had so many people come to him for advice. Well, anyone really, so he was excited to put some of his observations to the test. I can't be sure everything I suggest will work or be effective. I'll try to make sure it's at least explained well. He turned and grabbed his backpack and started pulling out his textbooks, his notebooks, and a dark, thick leather-bound tome. Tokoyami quirked an eyebrow at the last book. However, he knew to wait as Izuku was going over some of his ideas with his classmates. Everything was nice and calm in the classroom, and as Izuku was discussing way for Kaminari to handle the backlash of his power, possibly something to help him recharge quickly or to resist the amount of strain on his body. No one noticed the door open or who walked in until the book came a primal growl. Everyone tensed and turned to their classmate who entered the room. Izuku knew what was going to happen next and reacted quickly as Bakugo flung himself across the room at his target. Izuku quickly dropped the book into his desk and pulled out his wand to levitate the desk to ceiling. However, Bakugo was faster. Not this time, nerd. Bakugo pulled a coin out of his pocket and flicked it at the wand. A small, controlled explosion accelerated the coin. It with his quirk was enough to cut straight through the cheap plastic. This put a damper on his trick as the desk just floated at eye level now. Izuku instead dodged out of the way of the rocket man named Bakugo, who knew the book wasn't in the desk. As they say, nothing up my sleeve. But he knew there was something up his sleeve and Bakugo wanted it. Give me the book, Bakugo cackled madly. It was almost eloquent, the two boys' dance, ducking and weaving around punches, kicks, and explosions. The other students moved quickly to separate the two of them, until a bright flash quickly blinded them, and the smell of smoke began to fill the room, obscuring their visions. As the classmates' eyesight began to slowly return to them, it became apparent that this fight would not be contained to one room. A quick slamming of the door told them Izuku had just made his escape and Bakugo was hot on his tail. The trailing sound of pops and bangs heading away from them, Momo rushed out of the room followed by Kirishima and a few others. Tokoyami was awestruck the sight of a real book of magic. He had studied the occult as a hobby since as a child he had thought his quirk might have been a demonic possession. since it seemed to have a sentience of its own, but after learning that its personality was more a construct of his own subconscious and not a spirit entity, he still kept it up since there were some very interesting stories about folklore and myths. But he had heard of real magic existing long, long ago, but that seemed more of a fantasy than anything, ignoring the irony of how quirks suddenly developed in a society that had none. But he knew enough to recognize the real deal if he saw one, and now Midoriya started to make sense. He shuffled back to his desk and plopped his head down and tried to come to terms with what might be a resurgence in magic and what that might mean for the world. Meanwhile, Izuku had a lead that was steadily, if not rapidly, shrinking. He made a quick grab and opened the nearest door to him and slid into the room, which happened to be the 1B homeroom. A sudden gasp as Izuku hurled himself behind the first rows of students' desks, just as Bakugo burst through the door. As Bakugo prowled the room, he shouted, "Come on out, nerd. Hand over the book, and I'll make sure your death is quick and painful." A short blue-haired boy inquired, "Don't you mean quick and painless?" "I know what I said." Bakugo snapped, causing the boy to shrink back. However, Kendo didn't. She moved quickly forward. She knew Bakugo and Midoriya's history and wasn't going to tolerate him pulling his usual crap in front of her. "Now see here." Her shout catching the enraged boy's attention. "I won't tolerate this attitude, not like he does." She enlarged her hands and poked him in the chest. "You will not come into our homeroom chasing another student, and most certainly not one with your history, or I swear I will do everything in my power to see you thrown out of this school." She all but screamed at him, normally not one cowed by confrontation, in fact, normally thriving on it. Any response, which would have been of very colorful language, was cut short by another equally angry voice. "And don't think you can pull stunts like this in our homeroom either." Momo walked up behind him. "It's completely uncalled for to throw yourself at another student, let alone blind us and fill the room with smoke. Over some book, no less." The other students of 1A ran into the room at this point. Suddenly Bakugo felt very alone. Here he didn't have most of the student body and some of the faculty afraid to stand up to him. Now he realized that this school was for the best, and that meant even if he knew that everyone was inferior to him, these people together wouldn't be afraid of confronting him. As he weighed his options, between destroying all of them or surrendering, his decision was made for him as Blood King entered his classroom and seeing the extras promptly kick them out. As the students went ahead back to their own room, Momo waited a moment. "Thank you, Kendo-san, for stopping Bakugo-san. I don't know what gets into his head." She bowed as Izuku came back from behind his human shield, a silver-haired boy with shark teeth. "Yeah, really thank you, Itsuka-chan. He almost got my book this time." He gave her a quick hug and ran out of the room when Blood King started to grumble and growl. For the rest of the morning, Kendo was sporting a large blush. This was noted by her classmates, especially a head of blonde hair. After the walking catastrophe that is Bakugo, the students in the 1A hero course were shocked to find that Aizawa didn't expel Bakugo immediately for his actions. Since no one actually got hurt, the smoke had already cleared up before I got into the room, and that being blinded was only temporary. If I was to take action, I would also have to take some against Midoriya-san. A few stammered no's and y's was shut up very quickly, because as it is, his desk is still the only thing affected. Aizawa pointed to the desk that was still levitating a few feet off the floor. Sheepishly, Izuku pulled it back down and settled his folded hands on top of the desk, muttering an apology. "Now because you have your utility course this afternoon, you will not be using your hero costumes once again." Noticing a few confused looks, Aizawa sighed, because the point of the first few utility courses is to find out what you can do, not what your tools can do. That comes later. You are the hero, not your gear. After that concise explanation, the students were more assured that the teachers had a real plan for their education. Their normal classes had gone as normal as they could with a level of tension that was reserved for old Western saloons. Thankfully, lunch broke up the monotony. As Izuku sat down with Momo and Itsuka, who had for the last few minutes been going over notes with each other, he quietly tucked into his meal, unaware of the two figures creeping up on him, until he realized he was sandwiched between the two boys he had been talking to the previous night. "So, I get the van, you and Tokoyami-san drag him out, and we toss him in the ocean." The redhead started, with a smirk. "Get fake names and disappear across the ocean. No one will be the wiser." Right, right? All right, 1, 2, 3, break. Well, what are you talking about? As Izuku sputtered on his food, not expecting a conversation, much less one so confusing. For some reason, Kirishima-san has it in his head that the three of us are going to plan Bakugo-san's murder, cover up, and then fleeing the country. Tokoyami clarified. You forget one important detail. Oh yeah, and what would that be, my fine-feathered friend? Kirishima jokingly inquired. You didn't include the two witnesses across from us. He gestured to Momo and Itsuka, who were listening intently on the best-laid plans of mice and men. Either we have to include them in our scheme, or we need a way to silence them. Slapping his head, Kirishima chuckled. How could I have been so foolish? He mockingly stated, I guess we will need to sacrifice our own green bean to the two to buy their silence. Both girls shared a look. Deal, they said in unison. Catching the boys off guard, Kirishima leaned over Izuku. Do you think they planned that? No more than we did, my rambunctious red rapscallion. Tokoyami shot back. Izuku cleared his throat. Someone want to tell me what we are all doing here? He wasn't used to this much attention, so it was confusing to him, having friends to banter with. There is nothing wrong with sitting with your friends at lunch and goofing off, is there? Kirishima stated, as if it was obvious. Also wanted to talk to you about this morning too. That was crazy. That was the book though, wasn't it? Izuku nodded. He mentioned it to them last night, casually. He didn't expect them to bother digging further. Can we see it? Midoriya was conflicted. He knew it wouldn't harm him to show the book, since only he could read it. But besides his mother, he never showed it to anyone. Bakugo just wanted to burn it, not look at it. But when he saw the expectant look in his friend's eyes, he knew it would be nice to share for once. Pulling it out of his sleeve, since he didn't bother putting it back in his bag, in case Bakugo got triggered by seeing him moving it about. So, as he laid it on the table and opened the cover, he could see the writing and images properly as they were translated for him, to the others, just like his mother. The strange language that littered the pages and hard-to-understand diagrams just caused them to develop more questions. Kendo was the first to start to voice her questions. Midoriya-kun, what is this? Tapping his finger on the book, this is the origin of my quirk. It's what I have been using to train for the last almost 4 years. After taking another bite of his lunch, he turned the pages a few times. I have been studying and training ever since I got the book, and I have improved greatly. But what language is this? She inquired further. Dunno, he shrugged and took another bite of his food. I just can read it though. That's, Kendo paused, interesting. Glancing to the others if they could tell if he was pranking her or not. A few shaken head let her know they were unable to tell either. Sue, want to tell me how your quirk works then? Can't, he quickly responds. Well, more like won't. I could, but that's bad for me. Breaks a rule. Tokoyami was intrigued by any information he could get on real magic and was a tad more eager to get answers, so his normal aloofness took a back seat to his desire to know more. What rule? He asked, knowing that the others were more focused on why it would be bad for him to explain rather than there being rules for magic. I know that many quirks, he added knowingly, have certain traits that function better or worse in specific conditions, but actual rules, could you explain more? Since Izuku realized that explaining the rules would lead to more questions, and they didn't have much time left for lunch, he had to set some rules, to explain the rules. He found that amusing. Alright, there are a few rules that my quirk, making eye contact with Tokoyami, works by. I'll tell you the rules, but then we need to finish eating since utility is going to take up the rest of the day, so all questions will have to wait until later. Fair enough. Looking at his 4 friends, shocked a little that he has made so many friends in such a short amount of time, they all nodded and waited on him expectantly. Magic cannot be used to kill, nor can it be used to bring life back to those who lost it. Magic cannot interfere with love in all its forms. The purity of it cannot be tainted by magic. Magic cannot self-propagate, nor can it bring matter into existence. He recited the words from the first page. All members of his small but captive audience had many questions about what those rules imply about the abilities of their classmate. But they did agree to wait until a later time to ask him questions, and that might be for the best. It gives them time to digest, not only their food, but to also come up with the right quests and not just what they think of first. Lunch came and went, the students a bit lethargic after a meal, and the excitement of the morning had passed. When finally, the time came for their more practical class, they were raring to go, heading back to the gym where they held the entrance exam. There was excited chatter as the students milled about. Even though there were people who got in by taking the utility exam, the changes the teachers had made to their previous classes meant there was a chance this would be very different. Entering the gym, the instructors for the day's lesson were Hound Dog, StevenTLawson, and Powerloader. "Welcome, students," came the slow tone of StevenTLawson. "I will explain the purpose of these lessons. Then there will be a brief introduction before we move on to the first task." The students, more used to the different teachers than just the one they would have expected, were very excited to be learning from different professionals, as this allowed them to better understand the world they were entering. "My name is StevenTLawson. I teach modern literature. Why I have been selected to head this course is because while my quirk cement may seem like a straightforward ability, its uses are only limited by how I can shape the concrete. Therefore, my imagination is my tool." As he stepped back, a man in a yellow construction rig stepped up. "I am Powerloader. I head the Department of Support," which, for those of you who don't know, are the students who will be making your gear while you attend this school, and the ones who do well, your gear while you are a professional. He too stepped back, leaving a third, large wolf-looking man. Walking up and clearing his throat, he knew his role was important, but that many students in the past had ignored his advice or even him, to their own detriment. "My name is Hound Dog and I am the school's guidance counselor. Does anyone want to guess what my role in this school is?" A boy with a large yellow body, shaped like a deformed glue bottle, raised his hand. "You are there to help us with our problems?" He guessed. Every school had a guidance counselor, but most students didn't go see them. "Not quite. It's close, but what I do is important. I make you want to quit." A few of the students gasped. Why would a teacher want them to quit? Being a hero, it isn't for everyone. Sometimes you just burn out. Other times an accident or injury puts you out of the fight for a while or forever. So, the school decided that a part of the utility course will be to help you develop skills so that if for any reason you think you can't cut it as a hero, then you have other options to fall back on. He paused to let the students digest that information. He'd seen too many pros burn out, wash up, or just get too hurt to continue, and then only to realize that they had no other job prospects. This led to many of them getting menial jobs just to make ends meet, or worse, turn to a life of crime. These kids would need to be prepared for that possible outcome. Now that doesn't mean I want you to fail. Far from it, I want everyone to reach their dreams and goals, but if those change to something other than being a pro hero, I will be there to help you assess your options and help you decide, in a way, to make you quit. As he stepped back to the other teachers, it was apparent that they had never been told they could do that, either because they never saw their own guidance counselors in middle school or they just didn't have good ones. But this is UA. They make the best, because they are the best. StevenTLawson took this as his cue to guide the class to the lesson. "Thank you, Hound Dog. I'm sure that gave the students quite a lot to contemplate. Now for the lesson, first we want each of you to fill out one of these sheets." As Hound Dog and Powerloader started to pass around the paper and pencils, StevenTLawson shaped the ground into long tables and benches for the students. "These are questionnaires that we would like to have answered, so we can get a rough assessment for some files before we move on to more practical efforts." After putting their names on the paper, they started down the list of questions, asking them about their quirk, where they were from, friends, and family. Information about their lives. Yes, most of this information is on file already at the school, but the difference is you are giving it to us, in your own words. Hound Dog answered the unasked question. He knew there was a flaw in most files on heroes. It was just the numbers, the pure data, not anything that went into a person. It was important that they do this and see where they stand. The last question, the most important. Why do you want to be a hero? Take as much time as you want. You don't even have to finish it today, or this month even. Nothing you put in this will be seen by anyone but myself, Recovery Girl, and the principal, and even they must have a good reason to ask me for it. He wanted to emphasize the trust they could put in him. Teenagers have a nasty habit of bottling up problems or trying to solve them on their own, which they can, but it's helpful to have someone with more experience who could help them through the problem they don't see, instead of stumbling blind through life. Now, hopefully what your homeroom teachers did was explain what the purpose of the lesson today is. After getting a few nods, Hound Dog continued. Excellent. So first you need to understand that every quirk can be used in more than one way. Cementos took over from here. My quirk is an excellent example. It on the surface is just a terraforming quirk, but it's how I use it that allows me to be one of the top heroes. I am sure that many of you have come to the conclusion that you know everything there is about your quirk, and you don't need to work on it any more than you already have. He looked for the telltale signs from any of the students who have done this, but a few stuck out that they didn't. Deciding he needed a volunteer, looking around the room until he picked onto a boy with orange hair. You, tell us your name and a brief description of your quirk. A quick stammer, as all teenagers are not ready to be called on in class. He shuffled up from his seat and straightened his gym uniform. Well, I'm Tsuburaba Cozy Eye and my quirk is solid air. I can form walls out of my breath. Exhaling, he formed the air into a large disc. Excellent, came Cementos. Now, why does it do that? Quirking his head. Do what? Taking the conversation exactly where he wanted it to. Cementos finished his thought. Form a disc. If it was solidifying the air, why does it form a disc and not say a cone as the air comes out or a tube? Well, I never thought about that. Cozy Eye said, scratching his head. And that, class, is the point of this course. Most of you probably never even thought about why your quirk does what it does. If you can do that, it will greatly help you when it comes to figuring out what you can do with it. The class became much more enthused about the lesson since it became clear that most of them had never even considered how their quirks worked beyond a basic level. Your assignment for today is to analyze your own quirk. Being able to explain what it is and what you can already do is an effective method to figuring out what you might be missing. I'm sure you'll come up with some new uses by the end of the day. As the teachers watched the students begin to get up, Cementos had one more important thing to announce. Because of the nature of this class, there will be no homework assigned. This led to cheers from many students. However, if you don't take this course seriously, I will know. Everyone progresses at a different rate. Some quirks are easy to find new ways to use it, others not so much. Inwardly knowing that many of the more basic-seeming quirks are the ones harder to come up with new ways, but tend to also have the most unique uses. We will be looking out for your effort, so don't waste this opportunity. Seeing as the importance of today's lesson is literal self-study, you will be dismissed early. Next week we will open the gym to you all, so you can see what you have considered. Since just envisioning the ways to use your abilities is not the same as being able to do it. As the students rose to get themselves ready to go, Izuku pondered what Hound Dog meant about quitting. It sounded good. He understood that had he not gotten his magic, then he would have had to do something with his life. But he never considered what he would do with his magic if he didn't want to be a hero. It never came to him that he could have these amazing powers and not do good with them. He couldn't see how anyone could do that. But then again, there are villains. He muttered. What was that, Izuku? Itsuka came up behind him, taking him out of his own thoughts. Oh, just thinking about what Hound Dog was saying, he answered. Oh, that crazy, right? Like who would quit this? Waving her arm around the school, seeing the students walking the grounds. I guess, but it's something I never thought about. Not being a hero. He sighed. I always wanted to be one. But what if I can't do it? What else do I have to fall back on? I don't want to end up hating this or getting too hurt to do it and find out I can't do anything else with my life. I know of quite a few villains who started as heroes and just couldn't keep doing it. What if that happens to me? Whoa, heavy stuff. But come on, you're top of the class. She grabbed his shoulder. If anyone can make it, it's going to be you. And for becoming a villain, not going to happen. You are much too sweet to go dark. I guess, thanks Itsuka-chan. Izuku beamed up at her. It's great to get some support from the people you care about. Helps make the problem seem smaller, knowing that I have people who believe in me. As they chatted and walked back to the dorms, they missed that despite her only being a few feet behind them, Momo didn't show up to the dorm until just before supper was served. What's it like being a student at UA? How is All Might as a teacher? Aren't you that kid that got taken hostage last year? As the shouts and questions of the reporters outside the school gate got louder and more invasive, Izuku was glad that he was already in the grounds because of the dorms. Would suck to have to walk through that. Oh, there's Bakugo. Looking out his window, seeing a large cloud of smoke appear at the gate, followed by a quickly moving body. Gonna just ignore that for now. Kachin is not a morning person on a normal day. Getting all up in his face is a one-way ticket to Pain Town, but it's Friday, and if all goes well, I will have made it through my first week. As Izuku made his way down to the kitchen to make some breakfast, he noticed a few small groups of people looking over homework in the common room. Glad I got mine done last night. A few people noticed and gave a quick good morning, but other than that, it was quiet. Until a sudden burst of energy came into his life, in the form of an excited, pink teenage girl. Midoriya-san, Mina cried. Can you help me with my homework, please? Scrunching up her face at him. Yeah, sure. Which class is it? Izuku had no problem with looking over someone's answers and making some corrections. Utility. She stated matter-of-factly, I can't think of other ways to use my quirk. At this, a few of the other dorm mates were more interested in the response that Izuku could give. Well, he pondered as he poured himself a cup of coffee. What can you do now? He didn't want to waste everyone's time with suggestions she already had come up with. Well, I can secrete acid from my feet, and it makes the floor all slick and I can slide around pretty quickly. She raised her finger to start counting off. I can throw my acid like a snowball, and I'm working on a way to make it gooier to form walls and stuff. But I already had that before I came to UA, and now I can't think of anything. Izuku pondered for a moment, buttering a slice of toast. That's not a bad start. Izuku said, well, the first thing that I did when I got started on learning my powers was mobility. How can I use my powers to get me from point A to point B? And you have one way to do that, but have you considered the third dimension? He asked. What do you mean third dimension, Midoriya-san? Mina replied, the question intriguing her. Well, most people when they think about how they get from one place to another is how they move along the ground. So unless you have a quirk that lets you fly, most people don't consider this. He munched on his toast as he began frying some eggs. However, there are more ways to move around that flying and running. If you could secret acid from your fingertips, couldn't you make handholds and walls to climb around? He finished. Mina started to think about that. That's not a bad idea. I'll have to try that sometime. Izuku recognized his good deed for the day and went back to finish making his breakfast. So why did you start with mobility? Seems a little arbitrary, doesn't it? We all walk around most of our lives, so being mobile is something we always do. He plated his food. That means it's easier to learn new ways to move around than other things. As he sat at a kitchen table, his audience of people he didn't notice around him had gained a few people. Additionally, as a hero, getting to the scene of villain attacks or rescues is very important, so being able to find a faster or more efficient way to do that just seemed practical. He began to quickly eat his meal. Lastly, in a fight, being more mobile means you get hit less often or not at all. And there are some really nasty things you don't want to get hit by, so moving is very important for heroes. Incredible. Thanks, Midoriya-san. Mina rushed and gave him a tight hug. That's a great place to start, and you even gave an amazing explanation for it too. Top of our class for a reason. She, along with most everyone, went back to their assignment and to think about what Izuku had given them. A slow drawl called out to him though. So what's the real reason you start with mobility? Izuku chuckled, not thinking anyone would ask about how practical it was. Kachin, did you know he can use those explosions of his to fly? Tokoyami began laughing along with him. Oh, this school year is going to be crazy. Homeroom was quiet as they waited for Eraserhead to wake up from his sleeping bag in the corner. More than one student questioned why such a nocturnal person was chosen to lead their morning classes. When the bell rang, however, he slumped up to the podium. Good morning, brats. Today you need to pick someone to be student council president and vice president. Figure it out for yourselves. At which point he crawled under his desk to escape the bright fluorescent lights above. At this, the students began shouting to each other how they should have the position. After a few minutes, the ideas came down to dance off, since every hero movie is doing that now, a free-for-all, or voting for it. Well, since we live in a civilized society, we won't solve the problem by beating each other up, and since this isn't a movie, we can't solve things with dancing. So can we just skip the weird suggestions and call a vote? Came Momo's calm voice. Most of the class nodded, but there were a few disappointed grunts. After tallying the results, in a landslide of 4 whole votes, Midoriya was voted class president, with the vice president being, surprisingly, Todoroki with 2 votes. So the rest of the day continued as normal until lunch.
Izuku, crooned Momo.
Over here, as she stood by a table laden with food, waving her arms to get his attention. As he squeezed himself through the crowd of students, he wondered why they don't stagger the lunches, since it seemed like they took all the first-year students and gave them lunch at the same time, which seems to misuse a great advantage of having the different years' classes mingle. But he just figured he wouldn't ever meet any second- or third-year students at this school, so he resigned himself to the idea that he would have to keep to his own year instead. Midoriya sat down and took stock of the other occupants of his table. Momo and Itsuka returned to discussing something Midnight said during hero art class, which while he likes heroes, the idea of studying art history of heroes isn't as fun as one would think. Tokoyami was perched. Yes, actually perched. He noticed on the back of the bench, and it made him wonder just how much of a bird he actually is and how much is him playing it up. Kirishima was poking and prodding at his food and glancing around the hall, but for all of Izuku's skills, he could not determine what it was that was so fascinating for the red-headed boy. Until a massive explosion rocked the windows, and a loud siren started blaring overhead. Attention students, there has been a breach of the outer walls. Please orderly return to your homerooms for further instruction from your homeroom teachers. Do not panic. 3, 2, 1. Though Izuku. And then the students all panicked. Surprisingly, for a bunch of teenagers all in a school to teach them to be heroes, they are a skittish bunch, and were rushing the surprisingly small doors of the cafeteria, considering all the other doors were sized for people who were considerably larger than the average person. So when everyone at his table motioned to get up and move, Izuku raised his hand and scanned the crowd, looking for a distinctive head of hair. When he finally noticed the bicolored fop, he moved through the mass of students, all pushing each other to get out of the room. Todoroki-san, Izuku called to get the boys' attention. What can we do to get everyone to calm down? This is just going to end up with people getting hurt. Why is it our problem if people get injured? He coldly asked. They should have just listened to the instructions and followed them. We are the class representatives. We need to set the example. He quickly looked over the mass of students, formulating a plan. Before someone decides to start using their quirk to clear a path, how about you freeze everyone's feet? That would make getting through the door very hard for them. Huffing to himself, Todoroki firmly planted his foot to the ground, freezing the moisture in the air around people's feet. As the first few people tried to move forward to keep pushing, they all quickly fell towards the people in front of them. As the cries of panic turned into annoyance at the inconvenience of being stuck the floor, the students, since they were made up of the first-year students, turned to see the famous boy with ice powers, folded arms and scowl plastered on his visage. Izuku took this as his cue to speak. Thank you all for chilling out, he chuckled to himself. Now that you have all made sure to follow the instructions that we were given, he continued sarcastically. Quite a number of students grumbled at his attitude. Can someone please look out the window and see if they can find anything? A tall, furried boy looked over the yard and saw the teachers strolling up to a camera crew and reporter. Hey, it's just the news. They got in somehow, he yelled out. At the indication of the mediocrity of the emergency, the students started to mumble about how they knew it wasn't a big deal, and they were just going with everyone else. Because that's what teenagers do. As Todoroki turned the heat up in the room to melt the ice down for the students to break free, Izuku moved over to where the school chef Lunch Rush was placing his arms on the counter, watching the students. So were you just going to stand here and watch or get people to calm down before it turned into a riot? Izuku questioned the teacher that was in the room with them the entire time. As the culinary hero chuckled to himself, probably watch. It was pretty funny how so many people just can't keep their shit together. He started laughing at the look that covered Izuku's face. Oh, don't look at me like that. I just cooked the food. It's not my job to make sure the kids can handle a minor catastrophe. Izuku shrugged. That's fair, I guess. He recognized this as the same attitude from last year. Older heroes not going beyond what they knew or were responsible for. On the other side of the campus, in a small room lit only by the light of a computer screen, a blonde-haired boy pulled a small camera out of a ventilation duct and stored the memory card away in a locked box in his desk. Author's notes. Hey, I'm back. Took a while, sorry. Got all caught up with work and trying to sleep that this just kept falling further and further away from me, and every time I looked at it, I just didn't like what I saw. The way I was getting people to talk and interact just didn't sit right with me. For a few notes, I noticed a few things that just didn't make sense to me in the earlier episodes when compared to real life. Not a great practice, I might add, but a few things just didn't make sense to me. In my high school, when the students had lunch, there were a few staff, the cafeteria workers who served the food, and there was usually one or two teachers who watched the students in the room. So they don't get up to trouble. Sure, Japan could do it differently, especially fictional Super Japan, but still they had Lunch Rush who was there serving food and probably at least a few other kitchen crew, unless his quirk is to literally make food, but at least one staff member was there, and yet no indication that he tried to get the students to not trample each other to death. Second, this chapter will probably look drastically different to the rest of them. I'm trying to do different ways of formatting and seeing what looks better and what reads better. So I also tried to break up dialogues so different types of speech read differently. I put thoughts in italics and I hope that made it easier to understand. If not, I'll go back. Now it's time for review, the part of the show where I answer fan mail, live. Well, not, but I was alive when I did it so. At Fanfiction is my life forever. I'm sorry. I'm not saying Ida is going to die, but he is going to have a very bad day at least. At Anime A55 Kicker, not trying to go for edgelord shit, but the Hosa City really marked a change in tone for the story. The difference for me is I am going to have that happen earlier. At Tombs 456, thanks. I'm glad that my thoughts and ideas are not entirely unique, so I'm not alienating the readers too much. Next chapter 1 will hopefully make nice and short. For the weekend then, if I can get off my lazy ass and end up writing a big one for the USJ, it's going to be a bit different this time. I will try to have it make more sense, but it might be a bit more devastating than last time. Simply because of a change or two, but after I will explain the changes that I made. And why, so that I don't piss off too many readers when I have some nasty things happen. Till next time, I hope to keep getting the views and likes and always leave a brutal review. Chapter 12, The Nightmare Awakens. A smart person would know that normal teenagers left unsupervised tend toward a penchant to cause chaos. Superpowered teenagers, as a result, will cause superpowered chaos. What happened on the first Friday night at the brand new, undestroyed UA dorms led to new house policies enacted to protect themselves from each other. It had all seemed so innocent at the time. A simple phrase that was resounded by cheerful laughs and joy. It had all turned so wrong so very fast. Hey, let's all watch a movie. No one was sure who started it all, but they were sure of one thing. That person was an asshole. The dorm's common room was well furnished with many tables and couches, but what really caught the attention of the occupants was the very large, 70-inch UHD flat screen that was mounted on the wall. Apparently, the principal thought they deserved some sort of gift for being in the dorms, and a means to get the students to spend time outside their rooms. It was theorized by many students later that the television was simply a means for him to run an experiment on the dormmates. In interviews, Principal Nedzu has denied all allegations of such an experiment. The arguments ran for a good half hour of what movie they should watch. It was a dead heat between All Might 4, The All and the Mightiness, and the remake of the reboot of the reimagining of the retelling of Titanic, directed by Michael Bay VI. That was until someone pulled it out, a bootleg copy of a movie that wasn't even in theaters yet. This, my friends, neighbors, and compatriots, is a copy of Blood Slasher 3. Gasps were heard around the room. Dude, that's piracy, Kirishima shouted. Yeah, you wouldn't steal a car, or a purse, or a TV, or a pizza, or tangier, cried out Mina. We are heroes in training. It would behoove us to remain on the side of virtue and lawfulness. Came the pious statement from Shiozaki. Yeah, but I already have it downloaded on a disc right here, and it would be such a waste to not watch it now, since watching it isn't a crime. I'll even promise to delete it afterwards. Shoji responded, offering a compromise. After some grumbling from the purer-hearted teenagers, they grudgingly accepted to watch it, because everyone else was doing it, and peer pressure is a hell of a drug. As the students began to settle and getting close to each other under the blankets and sharing various snacks from simple popcorn to more intricate birds' nests, spirits were high as the movie started, until the first kill. Since the advent of quirks, in many professions they were discouraged from use, since many of them were in public, such as concerts and general day-to-day work. However, a market that never cared about regulations when profit and vision were there was Hollywood. Regularly flaunting quirk usage rules and general safety, this led to an explosion, in some cases literal, resurgence in movie interest. Quirks just made it that more real, CGI and quirks together made for some very realistic scenarios, and boy did the horror genre love that. They developed special cameras to work with some people's quirk, and it was almost like you were actually there sometimes. So when people said the Blood Slasher series was the scariest, and the rumors of test audience for Blood Slasher 3 being sent to the hospital for panic attacks and cardiac arrest, the students were in over their head. No one shut off the television when the movie ended, but only because no one was in the common room after the halfway mark of the movie. The students had holed themselves in their rooms, some barricading entire stretches of the hallways from any possible intruder. It didn't help that some of the students were afraid of each other. Normally, it would be irrational to be afraid of their own friends and classmates, but the Blood Slasher was more than just a movie. It was an urban legend, a young schoolgirl who went around killing and was so effective at it because she could look like anyone. In an interview, the writer for the original had said that he was inspired and terrified of the Blood Slasher because he swore that he met a young girl who took on the appearance of his at the time unknown murdered wife. He barely survived had it not been for his own quirk that let him control his blood flow. Not a particularly useful quirk for fighting villains, but for a horror movie director to be able to show how blood is supposed to move, it was a godsend for his career. He would then be found 2 weeks after that interview in a dumpster with half his face disintegrated off. So, the movies kept coming out and people kept getting scared. Just like tonight. The next morning when Powerloader got called in to check a complete power failure at the first-year hero dorms, the teachers found the dorm in a state that could only be called a war zone. It took a few hours to disarm all of the traps and to coax out all of the students, then another hour with Hound Dog for him to get it into the teenagers that none of them could be the Blood Slasher since she could only steal your appearance, not the quirk. So as soon as everyone demonstrated their abilities, they all calmed down in the presence of the others. As the teachers walked away, muttering about stupid kids and late-night movies. Pfft, stealing quirks. Scoffed Hound Dog. How stupid could you get? It's not possible. The morning went much smoother as the students broke off from each other and did their normal routine. It wasn't until noon when Izuku walked back into the dorm after his daily jog around the campus. He noticed that Momo was sitting down in the common room reading what looked like a thick book on advanced chemistry. He took a few steps toward her, wanted to sit next to her. Instead, he stopped. He remembered back in the locker room what Monoma had said. He, of course, knew the guy was a jerk of the highest caliber, and he shouldn't let this one person's rough comments interfere in a close relationship he was forming with Momo or Itsuka, but the doubt that he had grown up with, that he had never been able to fully clear out of his mind, it made him hesitate. That just maybe part of what was said was right. Was he sullying their reputation by being so forward? He didn't think he was. He was just doing what he always did. However, it wouldn't hurt him to take a step back for the weekend, would it? Surely, he could wait until Monday before pressing this further, just to prove to himself this isn't going too fast. With reluctance, he took a silent step away from the raven-haired young lady and went up the stairs to his room. He could practice his set for the next week of practical courses. Momo, however, was aware of Midoriya behind her. It wasn't hard. With the overly large TV off, since no one wanted to be near it so soon after the previous night's movie, she could see him standing in its reflection, looking over the edge of her book so as not to look suspicious. She watched him as he took a few steps toward her and then hesitate. And so, she waited to see what he would do. Only after about a minute of silence he turned away and walked up the stairs to the boys' dorms. With a heavy sigh, she closed her book and made her way up the stairs to the girls' side of the dorm. She had some thinking to do, which was both good and bad. She was smart, so thinking was something she was good at, but this was bad because she never thought she would think about this. She had expected that romance for her was some arranged marriage to some knuckle-dragging mongoloid who could barely form 2 sentences as a means to increase her family's wealth. Sure, she could always say no, but would she? Before this week, she hadn't expected to make friends, let alone find a boy she was interested in. In another universe, she might have just went with the marriage and lived a cold and isolated life, giving up on her dream of being a hero and just doing whatever it was her parents wanted. But now, she had people who cared, who wanted her to succeed and live her dreams. And this boy was hurting. Some way, somehow, something was wrong, and she was going to find out what it was. Monday, Itsuka and herself had both agreed to take a hands-off approach to Midoriya until they completed their first week of classes, so she would just wait until the weekend was over, then get to the bottom of the problem. Easy as that. A wise man once said, "Man tracked, ungot lacked." So, if she was clairvoyant like another famous hero was, she would see how stupid it was to plan anything personal for Monday, after screaming her head off at the pain that was headed their way. She, however, was not, so she quietly made her way to her room to make sure she was ready for whatever life threw at her. Author's notes: I'm back, sorry about the delay. No real excuse other than I got lazy. This one is kinda short, but I hope it is received as I had intended. Just a quick short insight into the lives the students live. Something not superpower related and just normal teenager stuff, which I hope to do a few times after big story moments. So nothing of real importance was done in this, just some character interactions and hinting at future stuff. Completely made up the blood slasher thing. Seemed a bit heavy-handed with who it is, but I always thought in a world of superheroes and villains that Hollywood would be the one business that wouldn't care, and would just make a bunch of movies about the coolest people and using powers to make it that much more realistic. Now for the review, the part of the show where I come down from my pedestal and deign to answer the comments that mere mortals leave. Nah, I'm not that arrogant. I'm much worse. So let's get to it. Anime trash pile. That is an interesting idea. Take all the aspects of a harem anime and then not make it a harem anime. Interdasting. DP. I know I got that comment from some people before, so I am trying to slow it down. Without slamming the brakes, really it's the high the students are getting that is pushing this so fast. New school, new teachers, new friends, new everything. It's all so exciting, and really the only person in this little menage a trois would be Izuku, and since I don't have much information on her in canon, I decided that she would be similar to how Ileheart 123 did in 106 attempts to get your Deku, timid to begin with and growing bolder over time. Blaze 1992. It is sad that until Yue Bakugo was his closest friend, I figure even when he developed a quirk, the other kids in his school never really got over the loser stigma that was attached to him, and when they finally realized that he was cool, they were either too cowed by their own shame for treating him bad or thought he had become unattainable in his drive that was only matched by the resident top dog / bully Bakugo. So I figured even now he didn't have friends. Acquaintances at best. As for the couple comments about, now you see me, yes, I have watched them. I do not care for the movies, solely because they never decide if magic is real or not in them. Because bullshit, they can pull off half of their tricks because it requires such precise timing and accuracy that is physically and logically impossible, or it requires them to not know their own trick while also knowing everything about their trick at the same time. It's really frustrating because it has a stellar cast and the stunts are quite amazing looking. The plot is just such a mess though. Izuku may pull off some bigger stunts like that later, once he gets more practice with his set, and possibly an apprentice. May pull some people in earlier, since I don't think I'm going to follow canon too much, or even try to do every single arc that the show did. There is so much I have planned. I just need to get my brain to work right to write. As always, till next time, and leave brutal review. Chapter 13, USJQ Air Horns. The energy in homeroom on Monday morning was immense. The students had gotten over the weekend jitters. Some students had made tearful calls to their parents, mostly about how exciting it was to be here, what they were learning, some expressing how much they missed their families. The door to the 1A classroom opened, and the students, having spent the last week learning the routine, quickly got to their seats. Aizawa entered the room. For seconds, not bad. He had taken to timing how long it took them to be quiet once the day started. He had them for only a short amount of time before they started their normal education. Today is a special day. Aizawa addressed his students. Because you didn't spend a not-so-insignificant portion of our budget on a few thousand robots for the admittance test, we were able to put that money instead on securing trips to various sites to further your real-world experience. He waited for the excited chatter to quiet before continuing. Normally this is reserved for the third-year students. However, the principal has decided that seeing how the industry, he said with bile-laced tone, handles the different aspect of our pro-hero society. So for those of you who are not familiar with how that works, turning glances at Ida and Todoroki. As such, the first field trip, which will be today, is for the Hero Corps students to learn how to rescue others in different situations. The wall panels open to reveal their hero cases. And because I keep making bets with my coworkers, I have to take you all for the morning trip, so gather your crap and be down by the entrance gate to be loaded into the buses. As Aizawa headed out the door, he stopped. Oh, and the Department of Support will be observing you all today. So, try to act professional and don't embarrass me. Later down at the buses, the hero students were milling about in clusters. Midoriya walked over to his vice president. Todoroki-san, we should spread out between the two buses. The bicolored boy quirked his eyebrow. What makes you say that? He questioned. Midoriya rubbed his hand against his neck nervously. Well, it might do with getting the other departments to better know us. Since they will be making some of our equipment, being more than that might make it better for student relations. Todoroki thought on that. Endeavor never really gave two shits about treating his employees well. He mostly just ordered his support department to make stuff that he needed. I can see where Midoriya-san is coming from. Those workers never did look too happy to see my dad walk in. I can relate. That's a reasonable idea, he concluded. Great, Midoriya cheered. Now we just have to split them up. As Midoriya thought of the best way to separate the students, Todoroki instead acted, forming a wall of ice between two halves of the students. Listen up, Todoroki shouted. We're splitting up the class between the two buses to better get to know the different departments. Mina, irritated that her conversation partner got put on the other side of the wall, shouted back, And who put you in charge, huh? Putting her hands on her hips in defiance. You did when you voted for us. Todoroki quickly retorted. Oh yeah, Mina sticking out her tongue and skipped onto the bus, seeing that others began filing in on whichever side of the ice they were on. Todoroki-san, that was a bit. Izuku paused, cold. It's efficient, he responded, entered the second bus, ending that conversation. Seeing his bus, he glowered. He managed to get all the social people. Ashido and Hagakure were busy bouncing around the carriage with Kaminari and Hanto in the back loudly laughing about some video game magazine. Jiro was listening to music loudly on her headphones. Aoyama was busy taking hundreds of photos of himself, with the flash on. Sato and Yururika were busy talking about baked goods. Then he heard it. Behind the driver was the very not workplace-friendly mutterings of Bakugo. He quickly to switch buses with Midoriya, only to run into Aizawa. After the homeroom teacher took stock of the bus he won. I have got to stop making bets about what parts of my job I do. And if I have to suffer this crap, so do you. He poked Todoroki in the chest. Back on the other bus, Midoriya and Yaoyorozu had gotten everyone into their seats and were quietly discussing their excitement in small groups. Tsuyu and Ida were discussing their families in the back. Ojiro and Kirishima were talking about the latest martial arts movie and how they wanted to incorporate some of the moves into their fighting style. Shoji and Tokoyami seemed to be sharing a seat, both looking to be taking a nap. Koda and Shinso seemed to be having a good conversation, the near-mute boy responding with his writing board, which for the boy who could mind control people with a response seemed very pleased that someone had no problems communicating with him at all, despite the boy's normal shyness at social contact. The slightly overweight bus driver got on. Well, I'll be. You are the most well-behaved passengers I have ever had. UA is definitely the best school if they teach manners like that. Putting on his cap. When the support students got on the buses, one group was happy with the nice and relaxed atmosphere. The other got caught up in a storm of activity. Both were very useful experiences to learn about the students. As the bus took off, Momo turned to Izuku, who was seated next to her. You seem nervous. Do you not like car rides? Waving his hands in front of himself. No, it's just I'm a bit nervous about the support students watching us, that's all. So you joined the conversation, Midoriya-chan. You were the top performer in the entrance exam, and you do quite well academically. What do you have to be nervous about, Jiro? The support students took great interest, intrigued that they were somehow putting pressure on the person who seemed to be the top hero of their year. Well, it's just I've never had an audience. Midoriya responded. Dude, don't you remember when you were up against Ms. Midnight? Practically everyone was watching you. Kirishima added, trying to get him to remember when he did have an audience. Midoriya did remember. But that's different. It's like when I trained with All Might. I could just tune out everything but him, unknowingly slipping out that the other hero students knew he trained with was All Might, because he had already told Kirishima that. The bus swerved a little. He felt bad that he was eavesdropping on the conversations of the teenagers, but this one was very interesting. He responded to the radio from the other bus if everything was all right. Yeah, it's fine, Eraserhead. The kids just got a bit rowdy. Shouts of All Might rang around the bus. Midoriya shrunk at the sudden cacophony of sound. Yaoyorozu, Kirishima, and Tokoyami quieted down the other students. Izuku-in, You were trained by All Might? Momo calmly asked him. Midoriya nervously nodded his head. Was that after the incident with the sludge villain? Midoriya nodded again. That makes sense then. She concluded. It does? Midoriya sheepishly asked. It does, cried out from some of the other students. Yes, I decided after they showed us that video on the first day to look more into that incident. All Might had been chasing that villain for well over an hour after his first reported purse snatching, she explained. So, it was nearly 2 hours later that he had taken hostages, everyone paying attention to her talking, which meant that Izuku had come across that villain and almost captured him before All Might showed up. So, asked a support student, exasperated that others were not able to follow along with her logic. It means that All Might saw that Izuku had a lot of potential if before receiving any professional training was able to almost capture a villain that eluded him for such a long period of time. Seeing a writing board in the air, written on it the words, "That makes sense." "Thank you, Koda-san," she replied. Tokoyami took this time to sneak into the conversation and try to alleviate some of the pressure. That means Izuku, even without training from All Might, was already close to the level of a professional hero, and that attention he got was purely a result of his own talent and training. Izuku was so happy that he had so many people looking out for him, he could cry. "Wow, so it makes sense that you would be the top of the class then," a support student said. Kirishima butted in, "But now with All Might teaching all of us, I'm going to be the best soon enough," he boasted. Other students started declaring they would be the best as well. The enthusiasm was high in the first bus. Izuku turned to Momo and Tokoyami. "Thanks for sticking up for me." Kirishima walked over and draped his arm around the small boy. "Nonsense, it's what friends do." Sharing a laugh. "Targets are en route to location. Over." A figure said, placing down a pair of binoculars. They were viewing 2 vehicles as they passed by a ridge. "Any sign of the primary?" crackled an earpiece. "Negative. Must either be at location or got caught up being a hero." The figure spat out. "Can't plan for everything. Rendezvous with the group. Prepare to seal them in." The earpiece died. The figure packed up the small number of tools it had and stepped into a shadow. The buses pulled up in front of a very large stadium. Upon exiting, they were in awe of the sheer size of the facility. "Is this Universal Studios Japan?" asked the invisible girl. As the group of students entered the building, seeing the size and what it contained, Aizawa addressed the class. "This is the Unforeseen Simulation Joint Facility, titled USJ. It is Universal Studios Japan," came an excited cry from the pink girl. As a figure walked up the step to the students, "Since I helped build this place, I like to call it the ultimate space for jams." "It's 13, cried Eureka, excited to see one of her favorite heroes. "Yes, it's me," the space hero spoke. "Since I'm here, I'm certain if Aizawa hadn't already told you, but this exercise will be based on your ability to rescue people in different scenarios." Turning to Aizawa, "Where's you-know-who? Used up all his time. He'll be here at the end for the kids." The homeroom teacher responded, "Ugh, he makes a great hero, but that time limit makes it hard for him to be a teacher." Izuku and a few students were able to hear the quiet conversation over the other students muttering. Only Izuku understood what they were talking about, though. As the private conversation ended, 13 readdressed the students and started to explain the purpose of the facility. When a swirling black portal opened in the center of the facility, Aizawa tensed up. He reached down to his radio. "Hey, are you still out there?" as he attempted to make contact with the bus driver. Outside, a limp arm hung down over the steering wheel, dripping blood into a pool that ran along the floor. "Okay, everyone back to the door," as he shepherded his charges back to the entrance. When Sato pushed on it to shove it open, "It's locked," he cried out. 13 pushed in front and put a key into the lock, twisting it, but the door still wouldn't budge. "Try to contact the school," the space hero shouted to Aizawa. Tapping his headset, "It's jammed." Kaminari also tapping his headset. Because of his quirk, he could overcharge the signal to boost it through a lot of dampening. "Mine's out too? Shit, it's a total blackout. Only way to get help is to get outside." Aizawa walked back over to the stairs and saw that some of the villains were beginning the long climb. He addressed the group behind him. 13 watch the kids. I'll buy as much time as I can. Hopefully someone notices something is wrong. If you have to fight, stay safe. Before jumping down and kicking a few of the villains off the stairs. Okay, anyone whose quirk might cut through that door, get started. Mina rushing up and throwing acid on the center of the door. It's going to take a while to eat through this. She shouted over the nervous and scared student. Just keep at it. We need to get out of here. Someone cried. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, came a voice from behind them. A shadowy vortex opening and a few villains stepping out. We are ready for this. We will just have to spread you out to start picking you off, one by oh. He started. An explosion cut him off. Fuck you. Bakugo shouted as he charged the villain along with Kirishima. That won't do at all. Kids these days, no manners. Kurogiri thought, before his shadows started to engulf the students. Only those who threw themselves to the side, escaping the pull of his quirk. Midoriya stood up, his eyes struggling to adjust to the darkness, high wind and heavy rain. He could see shapes moving in the darkness. Yup, it's the downpour zone. Hearing a scream, he rushed further into the storm. Momo heard a loud explosion go off near her head. Covering her ears, she looked up to see a pissed-off Bakugo. He looked at her, then saw a villain and rushed forward through the devastated building. Taking in her surroundings, she could see more desolated surroundings and decided she must be in the ruined zone. She heard a villain coming up behind her, licking their lips. She shot a staff out of her back, hearing a groan of pain, and quickly grabbed it and cracked him over the head. Bakugo's mad cackling and screams of terror could be heard further along the building. She ran to catch up to the class's personification of anger issues. When Kirishima hit the water, he almost sank, having his body hardened for an attack. When he saw someone swimming quickly at him with sharp teeth, he smirked and softened his body. The difference in density shot him straight up and out of the path of the villain. Shifting his density rapidly, he was able to make it to a boat that was floating in the middle of a lake. The villains surrounding the large vessel. Oh good, you're here. He turned to see a pair of crossed eyes and side goggles, staring at him. How good are you at engineering? She asked quickly. I used to help my dad fix stuff around the house. Kirishima answered the weird question. Great. Help me get this boat started. I don't want to be out here when they realize they can just sink this. Tokoyami and Jiro were fighting off villains as the broken ground offered dark shadow, places to jump out and attack, and the loose rocks let Jiro fire them off with blasts from her feet. Shinso was doing his best to fight off attacks from behind the two and trying to get the villains to talk back to him. But for some reason, every one of them kept their lips sealed, almost like they knew about his quirk. Tsuyu was struggling between keeping out of the flames and the various attacks headed her way. Her amphibian nature was making it very difficult to remain clear-headed. She did what she could to run over towards Todoroki, who had a circle of villains surrounding and what she could tell taunting him. The villains watched as a portal opened, but no one stepped through. It took them a few seconds to remember that there was an invisible girl amongst the class and started trying to track her down, failing to hear her over the sounds they were making from all the loose rock. Down in the center, Aizawa was fighting a circle of villains when a large tail and a large yellow student crashed into the villains. I thought I told you all to leave. He scolded them. We didn't have much choice, Mashiro responded before flipping over a charging villain with bull horns and slapping him strongly with his tail. Yeah, that warping guy sent us here, probably got a lot of us too. Sato added. Great, just what we needed. Now everyone is lost. Their teacher muttered, grabbing some villains with his scarf. A very large, muscular, black villain waiting in the back beside a villain covered in hands. Maybe you should go play. He giggled. Okay, now I need you to bend that piece of metal into an L shape. The cross-eyed girl ordered Kirishima. How I'm tough, but not that strong. He gave the girl grief. Duh, your body is as hard as steel. Just apply leverage and the metal will bend. She rapped him on his head with her wrench. He winced at the force. All right, I'll try. Flexing his arms, he squeezed the long sheet of metal into the needed shape. Surprised at what he accomplished, he handed her the bent piece. Great. See what happens when you use your quirk with a little physics. She cackled at him. Hopefully they are none the wiser about what we are attempting to do. Yeah, they are just waiting in the water. Kirishima peeked over the side. The villains were still circling the boat. Well, no reason to dwell on that. Now I just need a charge. Give me your cell phone. She put her hand out. What no? What if we need to call for help? Kirishima shirked away from her. She smacked him on the head again. You fell in the water, your phone is toast, and if you remember our teacher, the signal is jammed, and his equipment is better than your store-bought cell phone. So its only purpose now is as a battery to jumpstart this ship. Sighing, he handed over the device. I just got it last month, going to lose all my contacts. He moped. The girl laughed maniacally. I'll be in your new contact list, she said, rubbing up against him. His reaction wasn't one of embarrassment but forced acceptance. Look, if you really don't want to. Kirishima panicked. No, it's fine. It's just a stressful situation and I'm a little freaked out, okay? He very quickly responded. Great. We can be friends. She turned back and started connecting wires to the ripped-out battery of the phone. Ame Hatsum. She waved her arm at him. Ijiro Kirishima. He leaned against the door frame. So what's support like? Making idle conversation. Oh, it's great. Working in a professional workshop like that, Power Loader is a genius with his work, she rambled. How's being a hero? It's pausing to think about it. Weird. He answered. Weird how? I guess I applied for UA not to be a hero, but to stop bullies. He started. My quirk wasn't nearly as strong. I got cuts and bruises all the time. It was more like a callus that it was rock. I got into fights all the time, trying to stop bullying. But one day, I don't know, not villain, just huge scary guy was on the street and the people near him looked like they were in danger, and I didn't act. I stood there and Ishido-san, the pink girl, talked him away. Hatsum worked silently, listening to him tell his story. She only had a little bit longer before she could turn on the engine. It was eye-opening. I would fight other kids because I could, but when I saw someone scary I froze. I trained really hard just to get this strong, and then it turns out one of the strongest in our class is a bully. Hatsum paused. Someone in UA is a bully, how did that not get noticed? And the weirder thing is the person he bullied is also here, and he told me not to tell on him. I don't know what to do. He glanced over the water. He could barely see the shapes of the large group of villains in the center. I want to do more, but I don't know how. I think you just need to keep at it. Unlike me, you don't have your goal in life set. It's all right to not know what you want, even if it's not what you thought. And then sometime in the future when you meet, Hatsum paused in her advice. Got it. Cackling, she hit a button on the dash. By the wheel, the engine kicked to life, grabbing various levers and shoving them all forward. Do you know how to drive one of these? He asked, falling to the side as the ship lurched forward. Nope. She gave a huge, bellowing laugh as the boat raced forward, until it crashed into the ground by the center of the field. When the invisible teenager joined the school, she knew a few things about herself. I am not that strong. My quirk makes me invisible, but underneath that I'm just a teenage girl. With that understanding, she took various lessons to maximize the benefit of her quirk. She trained with martial artists on takedown maneuvers and how to move as quietly as possible, since she realized she might only get one shot at sneaking around. So, when she noticed all the villains moving around loosening rocks in the landslide, she made sure to put that to her benefit. Hagakure moved when the villains did to blend her sound in with theirs, and she always walked downhill of their own searching. So any shifting rocks would be only seen as moving because of the rocks they knocked downhill caused those to move. She headed towards the edge of the area, away from the villains, where she spotted a door with a large square sign on it. When she made it over to a door, she hoped it was an emergency exit, but it was instead labeled, employee only. Resigned, she touched the door, only to notice it had been propped open. Quickly, she slipped through, nudging the door wider, and then holding it carefully, shut it without a sound. Seeing as the hallway went up, she followed the path until she saw the light in a room labeled Security Office. Peeking through the crack of the door, Hagakure saw a woman sitting in a chair laughing. Teach those fools not to accept me into their school. She cackled again as it looked like the villains were fighting the students and heroes on the monitors. I could have been a great hero, but no, I couldn't beat those stupid robots, so I didn't make it. Well, who's laughing now? Just because my quirk only works on moving signals and not the direct electronics. Now look who can't call for help. Hagakure gasped, then ducked her head back into the hallway. She's blocking the signal. If I take her out, we might be able to call for help. She looked around for anything to help take out her foe, finding none. Well, I have one shot at this. The invisible girl snuck into the room, before quietly coming up behind the woman, pulling her into a sleeper hold, dropping her body low so the woman couldn't get any leverage to get out of the chair she was in. Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. She held tight for a minute before the woman stopped struggling and gagging. Lowering her to the floor, she checked her pulse just to be sure she hadn't killed her. Now to find a way to tell them they can call for help. Oh, I wish I had pockets, but no, I have to be naked. She looked around and saw a microphone, realizing it was connected to the speaker system. Okay, I can contact them, but what do I say? She worriedly paced the room. If I warn them they can contact the outside, what will the villains do? Oh, why can't getting people out be as easy as getting in? Snapping her finger, I got it. She pushed the button on the microphone. Across the facility, the speakers crackled to life. Tokoyami, Jiro, and Shinso had just beaten the last of the villains. Tired, they fell to the ground. That's intense, Jiro said, catching her breath. And it's not over yet, kiddos, a voice called out. I'm the puppet master. When I have my string on someone, I can control their bodies. The figure dressed as a clown danced around, tugging on strings. The bodies of the defeated villains lurching up, seeming held up by strings. Ugh, we just got done beating them, and now we have to do it all over again, Jiro complained. This is a very unfortunate position to be in. We are too tired to fight them all over again, even if they can't use their quirks. Tokoyami agreed, panting on the ground. If I can just get him to respond to me, then I can make him stop. Shino thought, hey bozo, what are you going to have them do to us? The clown stopped. He had explicit instructions to not speak to the one that looked like a zombie. But if I can't order them to attack, they'll just stand there. The three teen heroes noticed the unconscious villains just standing around. Getting back up, they had it in them to beat up one more bad guy. Come on, you can tell us. What are you going to have them do? Shinso asked again. It must be really bad for you to want to hurt innocent kids like us. The demented clown could see he was surrounded. He wasn't much of a fighter, it's why he was in the back. Once everyone had been knocked down, he was going to get them back up again over and over, wearing down the heroes. He remained quiet until the three teens piled on him and started wailing away at him. Please stop, he cried, then felt himself lose control over his body. Now, tell us your plan, Shinso ordered. Kill All Might with our weapon. The clown mechanically answered. Who are you working for? The League of Villains. Where is your base located? I don't know. Who runs the League of Villains? They call him Sensei. Shinso was getting annoyed. What does he look like? I never met him. How did you know about our quirks? Someone gave us a list. Their interrogation was interrupted by the PA system coming to life. More explosions rang through the air. Villains ran away from the demonic form of Bakugo as he angrily stalked the halls. Even villains whose quirks were designed for durability fell quickly to his rapid onslaught. When most men would fall in exhaustion, his frustration and anger fueled him. Momo followed behind, securing the villains with handcuffs and keeping them from being ambushed. With a guttural growl, Bakugo yelled, "These assholes are small fry. I want the top dog." He blasted another villain unconscious. Kirojiri had placed Bakugo in the ruins because he had expected the hero in training to be careful with structurally weak buildings around and wouldn't put out his full power, which the huge number of durable villains could overwhelm him. Bakugo loves to disappoint and had already brought the ceiling down in a few rooms. Do you have to be so angry? Momo yelled over his explosion. Do you have to be such a bitch? He swore back at her. Huffing, she ran to catch up to him. No, seriously, what is wrong with you? You yell, swear, and attack anything with such ferocity, I sometimes mistake you for a wild animal. Bakugo tossed the villain he was pummeling out a window. What's wrong with me? He asked incredulously. What's wrong with you, princess? You get into this school, and the first day you find a boyfriend? Me liking Izuku isn't a problem, she screeched back at him. Sure, it isn't. Did you do that at your old school? Latch on to the first person to treat you nice, he mocked. It's not that he treats me nice, he treats everyone nice, she answered, even people who don't deserve it. What's that supposed to mean? He growled back, stepping up to her, despite her being a head taller than him. She poked him in the chest, making him growl even louder. It means that I know your history with him. She stepped forward, and for some reason, That very sweet boy thinks you are his friend. He vouched for you. Moving to a window, she leaned out. She could just barely make out the shapes in the courtyard. He told me all the awful things you used to say to him, to do to him. And he thinks you are his best friend. Do you know how awful that must be, when someone like you was his only friend? He stalked up behind her. I don't know what the problem is with that. I'm great. You're powerful, that's all you are. She glared at him. And you use that power to what? Bully him because his quirk wasn't as strong as yours when he got it. No, I kept a quirkless loser from trying to do something stupid and getting himself killed. He shot back his own glare. Izuku is not quirkless, she said. Bakugo scoffed. Before he got that book he was, and I still think he is. What you think that book, the one that only he can read, gives him a quirk? She quirked her eyebrows. Yeah, of course, how else do you explain? He paused. You've seen the book? Yes, Izuku showed it Tsuka-chan, Kirishima-san, Tokoyami-san, and myself, because we asked. She gloated. That book isn't normal. He spat out. Even if you're right, we're getting off topic. She brought the conversation back. He's a good kid who wants to help people. Apparently he believes the same about you. Bakugo brooded. So why? Treat the one person who seems to not only tolerate you, but actually stand up for you when everyone else agrees on the fact that you are an asshole. Bakugo steamed, irritated that he got stuck with one of Midoriya's girls, that he wasn't fighting and destroying more villains, that he was having this conversation at all. So he chose to respond with honesty, because it works. Excuse me? He couldn't do even half the stuff he does now, when he first got that book. Yeah, he mentioned that. You tried to take the book away from him the first time you saw it. Did he also mention that he developed trick after trick to keep it safe, and I came at him in new ways to beat them? He said he had to get better faster, because of you. She accused him. And it worked. When I got my quirk, even the adults didn't challenge me, but that nerd. He never stopped. I would beat the crap out of him, and he'd come back the next day to show me something he thought was cool. Bakugo's anger waned. He never grew up. He's still the same annoying kid who followed me around at 4, talking about being the greatest hero and saving everyone. It sounds like you respect him, she commented. Because I do. Then why are you so hard on him all the time? She wanted to know. Because it's all I know. I was the toughest. Older kids heard about my quirk, so they wanted to fight me. If I was weak, I lost, and I won't lose. He continued, I don't do nice for people. It gets you hurt. They expect things from you. Do you have to be an asshole then? He growled at the girl. Let me rephrase. Could you try maybe being a little nicer to people? Izuku thinks that being here will mellow you out and it's good for you. I'm willing to believe him, and if you start to change for the better, I'll believe you too. Grunting and snarling, he finally relented. Fine, I'll try being nicer to people, throwing his hands up. That's all that I ask. She walked past him. Let's get out of here. It seems you finished your weekly chore early and took out all the trash, she said as she stabbed a villain in the head with her staff, knocking them out. Tsuyu was with her back to Todoroki. She struggled to breathe in the heat. Sea Frog Girl can't handle the heat. Little bit longer and she'll drop. The villain started laughing at this. And then there's you, Mr. Son of the Number 2. What can you do without your amazing ice quirk? Todoroki-kun, I can't stay here. It's too hot for me to fight, Jero. Tsuyu said between pained gasps. Ah, look at that. She already begging. Maybe if you were more like your father you could have saved her, but now she'll get burned up just like your face. The villain pointed a sword at the teen, who up until this point had barely acknowledged the villains surrounding him. That last comment pissed him off. No, the fire doesn't mean I can't use my quirk. He exhaled a frosty breath. I means I don't have to wait to thaw. He slammed his fist into the ground, creating a frozen nova that engulfed the villains, the surrounding buildings, and even shattering some under the incredible temperature change. Wah, how can you? The villain started to talk. You're a freak of nature. No, I was carefully bred. He started walking past the encased villains. The boy, who half of his body was frozen, slowly turned into steam as he heated himself, suddenly feeling a weight pressed on him, hearing a throaty and drowsy voice. If you are going to make it this cold, at least share your body heat with me, Jero. She yawned. You have to take responsibility. Todoroki smirked at the girl's actions and choice of words. He picked her up and carried her princess style, using the fire side of his quirk to keep her warm in the vast tundra he created. Midoriya followed the scream he heard. He apparently wasn't the only one. Seeing Ida sliding around because of the water, the two connected on their path. "Who screamed?" he asked the armored boy. "Don't know, but I think it was a classmate of ours." Tenya replied. He slipped again in a puddle. "You okay?" Midoriya asked. "I can't get any traction, which means I can't go full speed." "So not really," he replied. "We'll just have to think of something to get out of here and go help," Izuku said as he took in his surroundings, formulating a plan. Ida nodded. When the two boys turned the corner, they saw Uraraka backed up to a wall with quite many villains surrounding her. "How are we going to get to her and help?" Izuku began surveying the area until he saw that Uraraka was standing in a very large puddle. "Get ready to run. We can't abandon her, Midoriya-san." He gasped in shock that a classmate would even consider that option. "Trust me." He placed his hands in a puddle next to him. 3, 2, 1. He pushed his hands deeper into the water than they should have been able to go and grabbed. Ochako screamed as someone grabbed her by the ankles and pulled her down into the water, only to come out wet and screaming, being held by one of her classmates. "Midoriya-san, that's not funny." She slapped him, dropping her in the process. "Now we run." He grabbed the girl by her wrist and took off away from the villains, who were poking at the puddle, confused on where their prey had gone. "Hey, they're getting away." Ida, now realizing what was going on, caught up quickly to his classmates. As the trio ran down the street away from the enemies, "I tried an exit door," Uraraka panted. "They sealed those as well? So, there's no way out then, Ida?" "Not quite." Izuku pointed up at a skylight in the ceiling. "I know your quirk is versatile, but can you really fly?" Ochako asked the green-haired boy. Izuku shook his head. "No, but with all our quirks, we might be able to." "Not that I doubt you have a plan, but how can our 3 quirks, when combined, fly?" Ida asked. Izuku whipped on his cape. "Uraraka-san, I need you to grab us and make us weightless." The girl pulled both boys into a tight hug. The sudden change in weight and the high winds, catching his cape and like a parachute, lifted them into the air. "Haha, that's amazing, Midoriya-san. Except we are moving away from the exit." Ida chimed in. "That's where you come in. Use your thrusters to propel and steer us out of here, Ida-san," the boy laughed, his scarf coming out of his wrist to tie the 3 of them together so that no one would fall. When Ida activated his quirk, he was surprised at how quick he could propel them without needing to contact the ground. "This is incredible. In such a short of amount of time, you analyzed our quirks and found the optimal solution to using them to their full extent. Well done, Mr. Class President," Ida praised the boy. They rocketed towards the exit. "Brace yourselves." As they crashed through the skylight, seeing the USJ from above was an amazing sight. They could see everything. The mountains, building, lake, and Central Plaza were incredible sights to see. The difference was this time, buildings in the ruins zone were collapsing. The flames in the conflagration zone snuffed out, and the boat in the center of the lake just crashed into the shore. They angled and accelerated to the ground just as the PA system came to life. By the entrance, the students were busy fending off the attacks from the villains, trying to protect the support students and not get themselves taken out. In between laser blasts, Aoyama asked, "They keep sending more to fight us. It is very difficult." "Don't worry, kids, I have a plan," 13 said between sucking enemies out of position for the kids to hit with their quirks. 13 aimed their finger at Kurogiri, attempting to suck in the warping villain. "Just what I was waiting for," he mocked, opening a portal behind the space hero, tearing into its suit, the lights fading from its eyes. Ashido screamed when the hero hit the ground. Then a bit of hope, the PA crackled to life, just above them, and what was Hagakure's voice started chanting, "The 1st of October, the 1st of October," over and over. "The 1st of what?" Zero confusedly asked, the other heroes shrugging. "I don't know what the date January 10th could mean, do you guys?" Kaminari questioned the support students. 110. Until someone shouted, "That's the number for the police. She must have found a way to stop the signal jamming." "Oh, yeah." Kaminari turned on his headset, and sent a strong signal straight to the school. Yo, we're being attacked at the USJ. 13 is down. Over 100 villains. Send help. New, you brats. Kurogyri shouted, rushing past the down villains to grab the electric boy to stop his signal. He was himself engulfed in the strong, webbed arms of Shoji. He prevented him from interfering with the boy. Unfortunately, Shoji wasn't strong enough to hold him for very long. It doesn't matter. We'll let loose our weapon and leave. Let the heroes clean up whatever is left of you brats later. Before he warped back down to the center, Shigaraki was annoyed. The PA system started broadcasting a date over and over. I don't understand it. The children have called the school. Help is surely on the way now. Kurogyri, who appeared behind the hand-faced man, answered him, stamping around in a rage. That's not fair. We were winning. Now they get reinforcements. I thought we disabled items on this stage. It would seem they managed to thwart our attempts to isolate them. The shadowy man responded, whatever, let's quit and try again later. Shigaraki said, at least we can watch some kids and a pro die. He looked over to the big-lipped boy who was tossing some villains around. Nomu, go play. Start with the strong one. Show him what league he's really in. The black form strode out into the fray. We're doing great. I think we can really win this. Sato cheered. When Aizawa heard the announcement, he told the two boys what it might mean. Despite them being first years, these two are holding up pretty well in this fight. He just barely noticed the lumbering black giant approaching one of his students. Sato, look out. The warning was just barely in time for him to dodge out of the way of the massive swipe, which instead hit 5 villains, sending them flying across the grounds. Oh, they finally sent the strong one out then. Sato goaded, downing 2 tubes of sugar from his belt, revitalizing his quirk. I feel sorry for you. I'll take you out in one punch, man. Throwing a massive haymaker straight into the giant's gut. Except it did nothing to it. Sato punched again, then again, repeatedly striking the creature with one devastating blow after another, but to no effect. Dude, what is this thing made of? He turned his gaze from the creature that seemingly ignored him, before a massive hand struck the boy and cratered him into the ground. Sato-san, cried out Ijiro, jumping over a villain and trying to pry the big hand off his classmate, as it further pushed him into the dirt. Shigaraki laughed. You can't beat him in strength. He was made to kill All Might. As he pointed at the two kids, Aizawa noticed the distracted man and rushed him, attempting to land a punch, only to get his arm stuck in a portal and grabbed as Shigaraki touched it. With the momentum annulled, it was simple. And this little piggy went, placing all 5 of his fingers on Aizawa's wrist. Aizawa screamed out in pain as his skin began to flake off and the muscles and nerves flared as they slowly began to decay. All the way home, taking his pinky off the wrist. Now be quiet and watch what happens next. He turned his gaze back to his monster. Kurogyri walked over to Aizawa. And if you try to nullify my quirk while your arm is in it, well, you'll be able to buy gloves half off. Understand? Aizawa understood. He put himself in a bad position and now had to watch as the two boys struggled to get the monster off one of them. Ijiro was pulling and tugging at the large arm, to no avail. It was just too strong, even with Sato pushing against it. He heard a snap and knew that one of the boy's ribs just broke. The creature smiled disgustingly at its enjoyment of causing pain. He instead changed tactics, wrapping his thick and muscular tail around the creature's wrist. Sato on 3. Shift your weight to your left. We are going to try a 2-person front wrist throw. Normally, who wouldn't dream of speaking of his plans with the enemy right in front of him? But he got the impression that whatever this thing was, didn't think for itself. 1. Sato pressed against the beast. 2. Ijiro tightened his grip. 3. Both boys shifted. Sato pushed forward and rolled to his left. Ijiro pulled down, twisting his tail. Using the creature's massive weight against it, they flipped the assailant onto the ground, freeing Sato, who was clutching his side in pain. Ijiro pulled Sato out of the ground and backed up, giving themselves some space to work with. It seemed strong, not smart or fast. Aizawa smirked at Shigaraki. See, your all-might killer just got tossed by 2 teenagers. Shigaraki wasn't even slightly annoyed. He was filled with glee that the kids would put up more of a fight than they had been. What would be the point if they over-leveled their party? it wouldn't be fun. Just watch, the young man cackled. The Nomu stared at its obviously broken wrist. Its quirk at shock absorption would do nothing for the force supplied from a twisting motion. See, we can beat this thing, just have to use its strength against it. Ijiro caught his breath. The Nomu gripped his wrist and began pulling, until his hand ripped clean off. Dude, what the shit? Sato cried out. Aizawa was stunned. This thing just dismembered itself. Then its flesh bubbled, and a new hand formed in seconds. And now you see its second quirk, super regeneration. Even if you cut it to pieces, it will still regrow. Shigaraki laughed. Aizawa knew this was bad. If it was strong, could take a punch and even regenerate from serious wounds, it was not something that these kids could beat, and they might be right, it could seriously hurt the number one. The Nomu moved faster than the two boys were ready for. It slammed a backhanded fist into Ijiro, who was sent with a splash into the lake. Just as the boat crashed nearby, two figures jumping over the side. Sato put up a guard as the creature sent him flying high into the air, only to get caught by the trio as they directed their movement to intercept his fall. When Kirishima hopped out into the water with a splash, he saw Ijiro lying by the edge in pain. Quickly picking him up, Hatsum, take him back to the others. He passed his downed classmate to his new friend. What are you going to do then? She asked, worried for everyone's safety. I'm going to keep that thing, pointing at the Nomu, busy until help arrives. Not going to freeze at the sight of the big bad monsters anymore. As he hardened himself, rushing into the center field. When the now 4 teenagers landed, Izuku handed Sato to Ida. Here, you two go back to the entrance and see if they need help. What? We should all go, Uraraka stammered out. No, Ida-san's the fastest and Sato-san needs help now, he retorted. Midoriya-san, then what are you going to do? Ida asked. He knew Sato needed help, but was still concerned for his classmates' safety. Izuku pointed at the Nomu, which was watching them with cold, dead eyes. I'm going to fight that. Are you crazy? That thing is super strong and dangerous. Uraraka tried to reason with him. I trained with All Might. Nobody is stronger than him. I just need to buy time for backup to arrive. Midoriya spouted off before running into the center field. Ida grabbed Uraraka by the wrist. Come on, let's go. What, you can't be serious, we're leaving him? Uraraka shouted. I don't want to, but he has sound reasoning. Besides Aizawa-sensei and 13, he's the only one before today with experience fighting villains and has been training with All Might, so he might know what he's doing. With that, Uraraka let herself get picked up Ida. Since she nullified gravity on Sato, Ida was really only carrying her weight. Be careful, Midoriya-san, she cried out after the boy who was running head-on into the fight. Well, now I guess it's your turn, Eraserhead, Shigaraki spoke. Think you can last longer against our weapon than your two students? He was prepared to let go of the pro-hero's wrist when he heard a voice. Hey, ugly, over here. The three people turned their attention to a small child, who was standing up to the Nomu. Midoriya-san, don't, Aizawa shouted over to the boy. Oh ho, the magic kid. Shigaraki's grin widened. I bet he doesn't even last 10 seconds. Nomu, Shigaraki spoke to his pet. Squash this wannabe wizard. I'm a magician, Izuku snarked back, pointing to the Nomu, and it's showtime. The large beast gave a guttural roar and lunged at the small child with its fist cocked back. The boy smirked and whipped his cape in front of him, holding it taut in his hands. Shigaraki grinned fiercely as he watches the Nomu throw its punch. Instead of the boy being flattened by the creation's immense strength, the Nomu seemed to bounce off the fabric, rocketing back to land in a pile of dirt, gouging the ground few meters before stopping next to Shigaraki, who stopped grinning. And for my next trick, as the boy pulled a dozen decks of cards from his sleeves, I'm going to cut you to pieces. As he waved the cards in more intricate patterns, swirling before they spun around him in a swirling vortex. Nomu, Shigaraki snarled. Kill him, he screamed. Aizawa watched the beast flip off the ground and rush the boy at speeds he was barely able to keep up with. Yet Midoriya easily sidestepped the rushing monster and flung dozens of cards at the back of the monster, carving deep lacerations into its flesh, despite the wounds healing almost instantly. The beast turned sharply on its heel, its bulk and speed snapping its ankle as it did so, the super regeneration kicking in a second later to mend it. Izuku pulled out his wand and, extending his hand as high as he could, let go as the plastic stick remained in the air. Now what happens when this thing runs into something that doesn't move? As the mindless monster rushed the child again, Izuku stepped back and to the side like a bullfighter, as the Nomu clotheslined itself on the stick, which didn't even budge at the force applied to it. The beast's neck snapped back with a sickening crunch. It crashed into the ground with a force that shook the ground. Izuku bowed to his audience of 3. Aizawa smirked. So still think your weapon can beat All Might? It can't stand up to that, kid. He taunted the villains. Shigaraki snarled and reapplied his grip to the teacher for a moment, causing him pain. He just needs a little help is all. Kurogyri, slow the boy down. While Izuku had been stalling with the beast, he didn't notice that his foot got stuck in a black portal. The stumble was enough to allow the Nomu to grab Izuku. In a panic, Izuku grabbed the brim of his hat and pulled down, engulfing himself, moments before the Nomu crushed it flat. Shigaraki and Kurogyri stared with wide eyes. Where did the boy go? The warping quirk user asked the teacher. A loud splash drew their attention as Izuku pulled himself out of the lake, hacking up water as he dragged himself to shore. Oh man, that was close. He spit more water out. I almost didn't get out fast enough. He began twisting his cape to squish the water out of it. How? Shigaraki demanded of his captive. You already know. Aizawa smirked. The boy's magic. He laughed. Nomu, he called out to his monster. The boy is soaking wet. Be a good neighbor and wring him dry. Izuku was still taking stock of himself when he saw the beast run at him. He wasn't ready to get back into the fight yet. When he heard a shout, "Hey dude, over here," before a rocky fist connected with the beast's eye, briefly stunning the creature, before its regeneration kicked in to mend the wound. Kirishima kept up a barrage of punches using his hardened fists, which in this state had sharp edges leaving deep gouges in the creature's flesh. Dude, Kirishima spoke back. That was amazing. Now let me help you. Kirishima grinned back. All right, Izuku nodded. Reaching into his wrist for his endless kerchief. You distract him. I'll tie him up. It's your show, man. Kirishima blocked a solid backhand from the Nomu, sending him sliding back a few feet. Man, this dude packs a serious punch. But I can take it. Shigaraki screeched. Now it's 2-on-1. This isn't fair. They're cheating. Unknowingly letting go of Aizawa's hand, who kicked off the ground backwards. Hey, get back here. I guess I'll have to fight these two, so they don't interfere with the teens fighting that monster. One slip up and it's game over. As much as he didn't want to leave the boys alone to fight something like that, he knew that if Kurogyri and Shigaraki were able to start opening warps and grabbing the boys, they wouldn't last 1 second against that thing. No, we'll have our own 2-on-1. That makes it fair, right? He bantered back to the villains, activating his quirk and throwing a kick at Kurogyri, who had to stumble back to avoid it. Kirishima rushed back forward to keep himself between the Nomu and the young magician. He took raining blow after blow when Izuku shouted, "Now!" Knowing to dodge out of the way, a rainbow of tied handkerchiefs draped themselves on the creature like party streamers. Izuku yelled as he pulled tight on his end of the scarves, which then squeezed themselves to the form of the black beast, pinning its arms to its side, its sudden lack of balance making it fall to the ground. And just like that, we wrangled one villain. Kirishima walked over to Izuku with his hand held high. Dude, that was manly as shit. Getting a solid high five from Midoriya. How did you know that would work? Izuku sniffled and rubbed his neck. I got All Might in that once. Took him a minute to get out of though. Kirishima laughed. Oh man, you are going to have to share some of those stories about training with him. They sound fun. Izuku thought back. Yeah, it was fun. I'll tell you about the time he threw me in the ocean. Hearing snapping sounds nearby. Later though, it looks like he wants an encore. Kirishima looked to where Izuku was pointing. Oh man, this is so not cool. Hardening himself once again for round 2. Nomu, go berserk and kill them already. Shigaraki ordered the creature before throwing a punch back at the teacher, whose normal state would be too much for both villains, but tearing through so much of his arm's tissue meant his punches were slower, and he was more guarded not to get caught in a portal when he wasn't nullifying their quirks. The beast roared and ripped the remaining bindings, flipping forward and lunging, sending a barrage of punches and kicks at the two boys who were just defending, cracks starting to form in Kirishima's rock-like skin, while Izuku's cape began denting under the blow. "We need some more firepower if we want to bring this guy down," Kirishima grunted. "If I had a magician's box, I could end this if we got him in there." "Not even." Midoriya spat through his teeth, the force driving him down to his knees. "All Might got out of that one." "Well, that sucks that we don't," Kirishima responded. "Have one of those, but we could really use some help." "Die!" came a very loud scream, followed by an immense explosion, the heat and smoke washing over the two boys. The Nomu was stunned at the force of the blast. The follow-up explosions kept it off balance. "Kachin!" Izuku cheered, the explosion boy laying into the beast, which retreated under the onslaught. Izuku noticed that Momo had come up with him. Seeing his chance, he turned to Kirishima. "Keep Kachin covered. I think we just got our box." He jerked his head towards the ponytailed girl. "Hopefully the setup is done in a minute." "On it, boss man." Kirishima flexed and shook the aches out of his body before rushing in to provide cover for the angrily shouting boy. "Hey dude, I'm on defense, you're on offense. Works for me." Bakugo grinned.
D.
He showered the regenerating beast in explosions, its quirk slowing down with how many wounds it had to heal, while the punches from Bakugo weren't hurting it as it absorbed the shock. The subconcussive force from the explosions and the heat were felt below the skin. With Kirishima's sharpened arms, digging in anywhere it could gain purchase, the beast was forced to guard until it could see an opening. "Momo-chan," Izuku ran up to the girl, a look of worry on her face. "What is that thing?" She pointed to the beast. "Don't really know, not really important." He shook his head. "It's strong, fast, and won't stay down. They want to use it to kill All Might, so we must stop it here. And I need your help." She looked at his hopeful expression. "What do you need me to do?" "I need a magician's box," Izuku asked her. She was pretty sure she could make one, but she's never tried before. "Can you describe what you need while I form it?" "Yeah," Midoriya nodded. He described the box as 7 feet tall, 3 feet wide, with a door that opens in 3 spaces but also all at once. It needs to be on a swivel base. Momo was trying her hardest to make it as he told her to. She had never made something this large before, but she was determined to do it. Everyone was depending on her making the tools needed to stop this monster. Shigaraki fumed. Now they tagged out, grabbing the scarf that Aizawa had wrapped around him, disintegrating through the fabric. Looking further, "Oh, that's not fair. He's buying items too." He whined again. "Pay attention, or we will lose this fight. The Nomu won't be beaten by these children." Kurojairi dipped down, his wavering form making it hard to land a hit on the only physical part of his body. As the box neared completion, the Nomu found an opening in between the two boys' attacks. When they switched from high to low, they had to pause. The Nomu wasn't combat stupid when that pause came. It planted its knee firmly in Bakugo's stomach, sending him reeling back, his ribs shattered at the force. When Bakugo took that hit, he spat up blood. He knew he was out of the fight. He wouldn't be able to move with all his ribs broken. Kirishima watched in horror as his comrade was thrown over a dozen feet from the impact, sliding on the ground. He watched the Nomu seemingly grin at the prospect of an easy target, so he did the only thing he could. He launched himself across Bakugo's prone form and braced himself, because a second later the blows came raining down on his back, as the Nomu tried to crack him like a crab to get at the juicy meat underneath. Gritting his teeth and trying not to cry in pain as each hit became harder and harder. "Shitty hair, go. I can take the hits," Bakugo ordered him. "No, dude." Kirishima winced as another hit connected with his spine. He felt something shift out of place with the next stomp. "I can take it. I've always taken it." He stuttered. I won't let someone else get hurt." He stared into his friend's eyes. Growling and snarling, Bakugo did something he never thought he would do. He called for help. "Izuku." Midoriya swirled around to see why Bakugo, of all people, called for his help. The box was almost done. Momo just needed to finish the door. But when he saw Kirishima bleeding from his back as the Nomu prepared one more blow, the boy's quirk faded, completely unprotected. That punch would flatten him and Bakugo below him. Izuku didn't know when he got behind the Nomu, or when he wrapped his handkerchiefs around the creature's throat, but he did, and he pulled as hard as his tired body would allow him to. The blow missing by an inch. Bakugo took the moment and flung his hands over the unconscious form of Kirishima. "Hey, ugly, burn in hell." And he pulled the pin on his grenade-shaped wrist attachment. The entire building shook at the force of the largest explosion Bakugo had ever produced. Everyone looked at the center to see what caused such a tremendous sound. Kirishima collapsed onto Bakugo. Bakugo's wrist gauntlet was completely destroyed in the blast. Midoriya was thrown clear of the Nomu. Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and Aizawa stumbled to get to their feet. The Nomu stood, half its torso blown clean off, its flesh charred and burnt, its eyes vacant of any life. "Holy shit," Hagakure whispered from the control room as she watched the monitors. The entire fight having been recorded by the security system, which the heroes en route to the facility had been watching the tumultuous fight by patching into the same system. "Holy shit," came the response of the heroes. "I can't wait any longer," All Might voiced, walking to the rear of the transport vehicle. He opened the door and bulked up. "I'll be there in a few seconds, we're ending this now," before he leapt out of the moving carrier and leapt away at far greater speeds. "Is it?" Aizawa asked the villains. "Is it dead?" "I am unsure. The Nomu has never been damaged so much," replied Kurogiri, who was in shock of the events. Even if they were fighting, such a titanic force was awe-inspiring. Then it twitched, its neck slowly creaking to look into the frightened eyes of Bakugo. "No way. I hit it with everything I had, and that thing is still alive even with half of its body gone. It's a demon." Bakugo, pinned under Kirishima, could only watch as it raised its foot to stomp out the life of himself and his friend. The plink of a rock hitting the ground. Huffing, Izuku called out, "Hey, asshole." He panted, "I'm right here," broadening his arms. The destroyed portion of the Nomu regrowing, much slower than before. It turned to look at the original target. Despite not being able to think for itself, it could still feel, and it was angry, so much pain it felt, and this boy was the cause. It turned to face the boy and started to jog at him, its pace far slower than when the fight had started. Izuku turned and ran towards the box, the Nomu gaining on him every step of the way. He could hear the beast grunting and panting, or was that his own pained gasps? Momo looked in horror as the beast closed in on Izuku when he screamed, "Open the door and shut it after we go in." She instinctively flung it open and watched as Izuku, then followed less than inches by the Nomu, ran into the box. She had listened to his instructions and slammed the door shut and held it there as the box shook. Tears streamed down her face as she worried about the fate of her crush being stuck in such a small place with that monster. When a hand cupped her cheek, she looked up into his green eyes again. "You did great," as he latched the lock on the box, which began shaking harder. "And a 1. He spun the box once. Bakugo smirking in amazement at the trick. "And a 2. The box spun around again. The villains gaped at how the boy displayed such skill. "And a 3. The box spun thrice. The front door blasted off its hinges as All Might stepped in. "Never fear, for I am here." The students cried tears of relief that rescue had finally come. It had been roughly a half an hour when this nightmare had started. Presto! He tapped the box with a wand he slid from his wrist, then opened each smaller door individually. Those who could see into the box were stunned. Where its head should be was its torso. The head was in the center box and the legs were upside down in the bottom. "Now," he grinned, "who wants to see my next trick?" Kurogiri grabbed Shigaraki. "We have to go. All Might is here, and we don't have our strongest player anymore." "It's not fair," Shigaraki whined as he was pulled into the shadow. "He's cheating, it's not fair." His voice fading out. The rest of the villain had been watching the titanic battle between the weapon that was said to be able to kill All Might and a bunch of teenagers. They did notice that the kids were on their last legs. So, a few started chuckling and getting ready to attack them from behind, when a force dashed through them all. All Might stood facing them. "Attacking children in the back, that's very dishonorable." He smiled down at them. They hung their heads in defeat. They knew they lost. Izuku slumped down to the ground before a pair of hands pulled him into a tight hug. That was amazing, Izuku. She hugged him tighter. Truly spectacular. She babbled out praise for him. All Might looked in the box, then to his protege, before bellowing out an All Might-sized laugher. Bwahahaha. All Might wiped a tear from his eye. You got him in the box, young Midoriya. Amazing. He then poked the docile creature in the eye, amused when it didn't respond. When the other heroes arrived and started arresting the villains, a head count showed that the only casualty had been the bus driver. 13 was whisked away to a special facility that dealt with people whose quirks render them without a physical body. Aizawa was giving his report to Principal Nedzu as the police poked around the box holding the Nomu. All Might Sensei, came a shy voice. All Might looked around to see who was speaking to him, seeing no one in the direction of the voice until he suddenly remembered, "Oh, young Hagakure-san. How can I help you?" He tried to look where he thought she was, which was about 4 feet away from where she was actually standing. Close enough. I was up in the security office and managed to save all the footage from the attack. I think you and the other teachers might like to have that to review. She offered. Amazing thinking. I would love it if you could show me, then remembered he was pants with computers. Or maybe someone better with electronics. He rubbed the back of his neck. The invisible teenager giggled before he assumed walked away to go ask one of the other teachers for assistance in getting the footage. What do you think did this? As Officer asked another poking the box containing the capture villain. Oh right, young Midoriya. If you could reverse this we could arrest the creature. All Might gestured to the box. Izuku nodded. All right. He closed the doors, spun it in the reverse direction 3 times, tapping the box, presto, before opening the main door where the Nomu fell to the ground still. After a short round of applause from the officers, they cuffed the Nomu and took it away. Hey, All Might! He cringed upward at the towering hero. Yes, young Midoriya. He quirked an eyebrow at small boy who suddenly became very nervous. I think I need to tell you something. Midoriya looked around to make sure no one was watching or listening. He paused. Yes? All Might questioned. Maybe sorta. Yes? Told my mom. Yes? Growing a little irritated. That you were planning on taking her on a... He gulped. Date. Stunned, All Might blinked a few times, processing the new information. A date? Izuku nodded his head. Sorry. And you did that because... Not that All Might would be opposed to taking such a lovely woman out on the town, but he was usually very busy. I kinda let slip that I was friends with Momo-chan and Itsuka-chan and she was going insane, talking about grandbabies, so I sort of threw you under the bus on that. Izuku hung his head. My bad. Well, he drawled it out. I wouldn't say no to spending more time with your mother. All Might started. She is a fine woman and I could see us sharing a bed. Great because it wasn't you. It was Toshinori I threw under the bus. He cheered up. Oh, come on, the giant man shouted. The passing emergency workers glanced over, then turned back. They knew not to eavesdrop on a private conversation between the number 1 and a student. The principal made it very clear what would happen then. What's the problem? Izuku questioned. Toshinori doesn't have a social life, because I barely have one. How is that a problem? Just one night off. Izuku pulled out his puppy dog eyes. Please. You play a dirty game, young Midoriya. All Might not looking at the boy. Who taught you to cheat like that? Midoriya smirked. I learned it from watching you. He faked sad emotions. Gasp, scandal. All Might feigned indignity. I turned a young, innocent boy into a rapscallion. He swooned. Yeah, and I have 2 girlfriends now and I beat people up. He joked about the day so far. Oh, what will I tell your mother over dinner about her delinquent son? All Might smirked. Thanks, All Might. You're the best. Izuku said as he ran off to catch the bus taking the UA students back to the school. The bus was quiet as many of the students were in shock. Aizawa had been put on the bus, his arm wrapped up tightly. He would regain full motion in it after a week of treatment by Recovery Girl. Izuku slumped into his seat, next to Momo who saved it for him. Hey. He said to her. Hey. She replied back. So, what are we? He asked, hoping to get it in the open. I think we can save that for when Itsuka is with us. She answered. Is there in US? He hoped. I would like that, the three of us. She whispered, before kissing him on the cheek. You were very brave today. You were amazing. I don't think we would have stopped it without you there. He leaned his head on her shoulder. Being short ain't too bad if you can do stuff like this. I don't think I was. Before Izuku's snoring took her out of her self-depreciating rant. She let him rest there for the remainder of the ride back to the campus. That evening, the 1B students who were in the dorms were bombarding the 1A students about what happened. All they were told was that their afternoon trip was canceled because some accident happened at the USJ. So, obviously, like normal teens, it meant they were asking questions over each other and not allowing anyone to respond. Quiet! Came a very feminine scream. The invisible girl Hagakure did so to get everyone's attention. Thank you, she hummed. Now I have here in my hand, holding aloft a flash drive, a copy of the security footage from earlier today. What? How did you get that? Show us. She waited about 3 seconds before letting out an ear-piercing whistle. Thank you all for calmly asking questions, she shamed them, twirling the stick in her invisible hands. It seemed to be floating in a circle to them. Now I was thinking of putting on a movie, but I don't seem to have snacks or anything of the sort, so I guess I'll have to go watch up in my room. No, oh. Wait, please. I'll get the drinks. I'll get the popcorn. Smirking to herself, Hagakure sat on the couch. The floating clothes the only evidence she sat there. See, just like that. Izuku had sat on another couch flanked by Itsuka and Momo. He didn't want to watch the events of the day again, but he needed to see where he made mistakes, so he could improve. The two girls each had a hand, and were nervous. Itsuka because she was now going to see what they went through, and Momo because she would have to see what she missed. The snacks piled up, and before they started, I spoke to someone in the support department as a favor for today. I had them edit the footage, since the event only took about a half an hour anyway. Instead of trying to watch all the angles at once, would be pretty hard. So they put them in an order I think was really movie quality. She plugged the flash drive into her laptop, which she had hooked up to the huge television. When the footage began, the 1B students were amazed at seeing the USJ. They became a little jealous they didn't get to go that afternoon. Then the villains began pouring in. They watched as Kirishima and Hatsum hotwired the boat and sped away from the lake. They cheered as Tokoyami, Shinso, and Jiro battled dozens of villains. The three teens blushing as they got praised heaped on them. Hagakure's part was hard to catch, so she had to pause the video to tell them what she was doing. Other 1A students started to thank her for being able to allow them to call for help in that stressful situation, which she ate up heartily. When the students watched Tsuyu struggle to move around the flames, they realized how much more dangerous some situations could be just because of the environment being ill-suited for their quirk. When Todoroki froze nearly the entire building, flames and all, most of the students were sitting in silence. Seriously, that's not fair. He's so strong. When Todoroki began carrying Tsuyu out, some of the girls squealed. Oh my god, he's like a prince. And she's his frog princess. How romantic with the snow. The movie had to be paused because they were reacting so strongly. Midoriya whispered, Is it really that cute? Yup, very cute, Itsuka nodded. It's a very romantic moment, Momo agreed. Oh, Izuku pondered. Am I romantic? When the movie started up again, showing the students who had gotten left behind, Ashido and Aoyama both began boisterously cheering themselves on as they watched the fighting. Yeah, we're the best. Did you see my cape? Beautiful, is it not? Then it cut to Bakugo and Momo, watching as Katsuki tore into the villains and seeing them flee before him, made them question some things. Any of you kind of feel bad for them? How can someone like him be a hero? Did we get a mix-up with the villains or something? Before Izuku could voice his displeasure about them picking on Bakugo when he wasn't here, Momo instead went to his defense. Hey, he's brash and angry and destructive, but I have seen that he has what it takes to be a great hero. Just as the audio equipment picked up the conversation between the two, all that did was raise more questions about the current top student of the year, questions that would go on to shake the foundation of their society to the core. Hearing Momo and Katsuki talk, Izuku turned to the ponytailed girl. You mean it? You believe he's a good person too? He asked with wide eyes. I believe you. She booped his nose. Just so long as you do, I will. And he's not all that bad when he's not directing his anger at you. Thanks, he pulled her into a tight hug. The cameras cut to the downpour zone. With the high winds and rain, it was impossible to tell what people were saying. But the audience went wild when they saw the trio combine their quirks in such a creative manner. Whoa, no way. You guys flew. You guys used everything to your advantage and flew. Most impressive. We gotta practice our quirks together sometime. As many students prepared different ways to work with other quirks to get cool results. The movie paused once more. Hey, what gives? Yeah, turn it back on. Hang on, Hagakure shushed the other kids. This is the big one. I watched this on the monitors, and it was really scary. Oh, it can't be that bad. We watched Blood Slasher 3. This is different, she screamed. Blood Slasher's a movie. This was real. Kirishima-san, Bakugo-san, Sato-san, and Ijiro-san are all in the infirmary for the night because of this, and Aizawa-sensei almost lost his arm. It's not a joke. It's real life. She continued her rant. This is what the pros were trying to tell us. This was a fight that could end careers, end lives. Then she sniffled. That nice bus driver wasn't even a hero, and he. She wept. Mina pulled her into a hug, soothing her. Itsuka stood up. She's right. This wasn't a game. Those villains were playing for keeps, with children. Shinso also spoke in defense. Yeah, from what they told us, they wanted to kill All Might, and it didn't matter how many kids got hurt or killed to do it. That was the real deal. What pros have to handle. The jovial mood died quickly. Many of the people who were in the incident might not have survived if they didn't think quickly and clearly. So, anyone, Hagakure sniffled, who doesn't want to see it or thinks this is going to be a big joke or like an action movie, please leave. This part is for education. Some of us almost died here, and we need to learn from this to do better. No one moved. Itsuka and Momo squeezed Izuku's hand, reassuring him they were there for him. When the footage started up again, the teens watched as Sato, Ijiro, and Aizawa began fighting the horde of villains in the central plaza. For the people who didn't see it clearly, be it they were in different zones or were at the entrance gate, and those who weren't there, this showed quickly how different things became down in the thick of it. Watching their friends fight was exciting. They could see how skilled the three of them were, taking on so many villains. However, they watched with dread as the Nomu lumbered its way over to Sato. They saw him throw a punch that would have laid out any of them. They saw him go down. Watching Ijiro and Sato struggle to get the Nomu off his was terrifying. It never flinched, and when it ripped its own hand off to regrow a new one, someone screamed. Seeing Aizawa's skin disintegrate off was bile-inducing. They tried to understand how useless he must have felt being caught and forced to watch the beating the monster was going to deliver. When Sato and Ijiro were thrown clear, they cheered when it showed on the camera that the trio managed to catch their classmate in the air from a deadly fall. They watched as Izuku calmly strode up to the muscle-bound monstrosity. It's showtime. Before the fight truly began, the teens sat in awe at how one person used so many tricks to subvert the creature, fending off and delivering powerful attacks right back. Seeing the Nomu cut up and covered in blood from the cuts. When Izuku's foot got caught in the warp trap that Kurojirai used, many people threw popcorn at the screen, calling him a cheater. Momo and Itsuka dug their fingers into Izuku's hand as they watched him get grabbed. Even though the boy was sitting just a few feet away, cries of no and oh my god rang out as the viewers got so caught up in what was on screen. When he pulled down the hat and popped out of the water a second later, the audience didn't voice it, but they all questioned even more the green-haired boy in their class. The excitement rose once more. Watch Izuku and Kirishima work together to fight the creature. Until they were put on the defensive, people were losing hope. Where are the pros? Somebody help them. The speakers reverberated at Bakugo's very loud entrance. Seeing him release an onslaught of devastating and explosion punches on the creature, it was frightening, like watching two wild animals fight for dominance. They saw Izuku run towards Momo and how he began speaking to her. But the focus quickly shifted to watching the two spiky-haired teens release an unending assault on the giant. Explosions, punches, lacerations rained on the creature. It looked completely one-sided, until what looked like a lucky knee strike landed on Bakugo, sending him sailing away. People cried as they watched Kirishima take blow after blow, each more powerful than the last, each capable of leveling a building. But the boy held his ground. The teenage superheroes sat as they watched as his quirk faded, and the anger in the boy under him faded to fear. Hearing him cry out for help was heartbreaking. That Izuku didn't hesitate was astonishing for them. As Izuku switched to trying to choke the creature out, the camera shook, and the audio cut out when Akatsuki pulled the pin. The force too great for the equipment to handle.
Holy fuck.
Is that thing finally dead? Oh God, I'm going to be sick. The Nomu, in high definition, stood, half its torso blown clean off. When it twitched, people were angry. Why won't you die? No, 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 that's not right. What the fuck is that thing? Their emotions taking over. When it looked about ready to kill two of their classmates, they saw Izuku throw a rock, and the chase was on. Come on, come on. Faster, go faster. Make it, make it, make it. When the two forms slipped into the box, people watched it shake and rattle. Then Izuku stepped out from behind it. They were stunned as he spun around the box, and the camera could just barely make out what he did to the Nomu. When All Might entered the scene, people cheered. The fight was over. They had won. The movie ended there, students in a flurry of energy, emotions, and questions. But when someone looked at where Midoriya had been sitting earlier, the couch was empty. Momo and Itsuka had left with him. Back up in Izuku's room, the girls sat on his bed while he took a chair. I think it's time we figured some things out. He started, the two girls nodding. What are we? I think we want to be more than friends. Itsuka looked to Momo for confirmation. Yeah, this is, she paused, different than everything I grew up with, but I think that it's better this way. How so? Izuku wasn't opposed to the idea, but he did want to know their feelings, so it didn't get misconstrued later. Growing up, romance was always something I saw between my mom and dad or in movies and sappy romance novels. Momo explained. What I saw from my parents was not what I wanted. They tolerate each other, but I don't think they love each other. And the books were always so dramatic. This is, she waved her hands around. This feels right. I had similar. My dad tried so hard raising me after my mom passed that I never saw him try again with another woman. And television always made it seem like big things had to happen for it to be real, like confessing in the rain. Kendo continued. But with you it feels nice. I just can be with you and not worry. I'm not ready to say it's love yet, but I want to see where we go. Izuku thought on this very hard before simply saying, I don't want to date you too. What? The girls were horrified. They barred their true feelings to this boy and he's rejecting them. I want us three to date, which confused them. Izuku, you better start explaining, snarled Itsuka, who was very frustrated at the sharp, emotional dive she just experienced. Izuku backed up to the wall, concerned that he did something wrong. He gulped, inhaling a deep breath. I don't want it to be Izuku and his two girlfriends. I want it to be us three, together. Not sharing one boy, sharing each other. Spending time when we can, going on dates with each other, or all together. No favorites, no picking sides. Can we, maybe try that? Wow, that's all the wind taken from Itsuka's sails. An incredibly mature decision. Momo stated, turning to Itsuka, would that work? Would you be able to feel for me the same as Izuku? I don't know. I never thought to try. She blushed. How about we start like this? Momo caressed the strawberry blonde girl's cheek and leaned into a passionate kiss, which made Kendo hesitate, but once she returned with vigor. She gasped after coming out of the kiss. I think that might work. Turning a lustful gaze at the young man who was watching them. I think we need to see what he thinks about it. She grabbed his wrist and pulled him firmly against her body and landed a deep kiss that made Izuku's knees weak. 30 seconds later, when she let him go, Momo grabbed him next. I think I want to sample this flavor too. Before throwing herself on him, planting her lips on his own. Izuku's mind was going blank. These girls are going to be the death of me. As Momo deepened the kiss, and I'm going to love every minute of it. He panted as he was released, all three of them sporting a heavy blush. So, what do you girls want to do now? He shifted his weight a little. I think after today, it calls for a steamy hot shower. Momo said. That does sound pretty good right now. Izuku concurred. Oh, look at him. Got 2 kisses and already confident enough to join you in the shower. Kendo teased. And no, I meant. Izuku's stammering returned full force. Maya, onon shower. Deciding to be merciful on the poor boy after the day he had. Momo leaned down and kissed him on the cheek. I know what you meant, and if this works out, I might just invite the both of you to join me. She laughed, sashaying her hips as she walked out the room. Looking over her shoulder to see both of her new significant others checking her out, it felt good to be wanted. Ooh, girl plays dirt? Kendo grinned, planting a kiss on his other cheek, before she too mimicked Yaoyorozu and slunk out of the room, making sure Midoriya was watching. This will be so much fun. Damn it, he swore to himself. Now I need a cold shower. In the infirmary, the people occupying the beds were having a different night. Hey Bakugo-san, whispered Kirishima. You awake? No shitty hair. I'm talking in my sleep. Bakugo whisper shouted back. What do you want? Just wanted to say that you were really manly today. Kirishima praised him. Bakugo smiled. Yeah, I was. You're not so bad yourself either. Hee hee, Kirishima chuckled. So, what's up with shitty hair? 'Cause you have shitty hair, he barked back. You're just mad we have the same style, Kirishima joked. And I wear it better. Fuck you, I have style. You just have shitty hair. Bakugo growled. Hey, if I'm shitty hair, does that mean I can call you Kachin, like Midoriya-san? Kirishima sheepishly asked. Only, Bakugo stuttered. Only if you're with me. That's cool, Kirishima laid back. 'Cause I want to hang with you some more. You're pretty cool when you're chill like this. Oi, I'm always cool, he shot back. Yeah, you kind of are, Kirishima said, as he turned over to get some sleep. He said under his breath, and not afraid to be who you are. Okay, let's review the footage again. Who are these people? A long stick smacked the projected image of Shigaraki and Kurogiri on the wall. Interrogations and what Shinso-kun was able to get, Ms. Midnight started. He's good at that too, getting people to talk. A few nods, yes so. They call themselves the League of Villains, and they work for a guy named Sensei. The image flipped to a man in a suit, with no head. Best description I was able to get from underground contacts is this guy is powerful. Aizawa spoke up, taking the discussion to what information he was able to gather so far. He showed up, took out some of the major players about a year ago. Been quiet on where he is, or who he is since. Aizawa flipped to the next slide. A lot of money has been flowing around recently. Would have been next to impossible to track if someone hadn't started looking into some of it already. What? Who here was investigating him and didn't tell us? Hound Dog questioned. All Might, getting the frail man's attention. You want to answer that for us? No, it can't be. Toshinori gasped. What can't be? Asked Vlad King. I was investigating young Midoriya's father. Toshinori stood, then walked over to a file cabinet and grabbed something inside. He then placed a folder down on the table. Yes, it seems that we might have a spy in our midst, the principal concluded. And it might be the strange boy who's topping the class. So, do we take him out now then? Asked Power Loader. Based on that fight, it looks like it won't be easy. No, I don't think direct confrontation will work. He's an unknown variable, and how much of a threat he could be. Nedzu shook his head. We'll observe him more closely. The furry principal huffed. We need a way to get closer, to insert one of us more into his daily life. Dig up more of his past. I might have a way. Toshinori raised his hand. Do tell. Nedzu ferally grinned. This is bullshit, he's cheating. How can he have so many quirks? Only Sensei has that many. Shigaraki kicked over a bar stool. Here, drink this and calm down. Kurogiri passed him a glass of amber liquid. The television in the corner crackled to life. What's the damage? The voice asked. The Nomu was. Kurogiri tried to report in but was cut off by Shigaraki's rage. It was bullshit. We were winning, then this stupid kid with his stupid green hair and his stupid freckles shows up with a dozen quirks and cheats. Oh really? Tell me more about him. The voice sounded intrigued. Kurogiri pulled up the files that they had gotten from their raid on UA. Says here the kid is named Izuku Midoriya, and he listed his quirk as Magic Da. The TV was silent. Sensei? Shigaraki asked with a concerned tone, his anger gone when he realized something was wrong with his teacher.
Sens.
He was cut off. I have to look into something, the voice rapidly said. Something I must have missed 15 years ago. Then the screen faded to black. We need more Nomus. Wine Shigaraki. We need more people, period. Kurogyri waved his hand to an empty bar. Well then, let's go recruiting. The gray-haired man-child cackled as he stepped out of the bar. Author's notes, 15,847 words, without including ANs. How you like me now? I really do hope people enjoyed the USJ arc. That the tension was good. It was believable how people got out of the situations they were in. I'm not saying everyone is getting paired up, but I am also not saying no one else is getting paired up. I am trying to be subtle and write real relationships here. I want people to look at them and think, yeah, I can really see this working out. Not just glance over it because nearly every story has a pairing in it. What I struggled with writing this chapter was canon information. Looking back over the USJ and the villains, something irked me. Then I reread and watched the episode again, and came to a singular conclusion. Why the fuck didn't they leave the moment the villains showed up? The door wasn't locked. Kurogyri might not have been able to warp people up there with Izawa who could nullify that part of his quirk, so they could have fucking left and called for help way sooner. So I had to seal them in. Then came the logic. How did they get there? The buses. Who drove the buses? Izawa and a bus driver, who would have been outside with the buses, which meant the villain who sealed them in wouldn't want any witnesses. So sorry, bus driver. We barely knew you. So then I had to think, why can't they just bust out? Well, the doors are obviously going to be tougher than wood, so it would take a while to break through, which they didn't have. Then I tried to spread out the characters in a way that would allow them to logically join the fight while showcasing some strengths. I hope people enjoyed the action. Now here's why I chose who went where. With the boat, Kirishima can't swim using his quirk, but I realized with him shifting density he could reasonably get out of the water with some difficulty. Hatsum was because I thought it would be funny if someone decided the boat had to work on some level if they kept it in a lake, floating. So why shouldn't someone try to drive the damn thing? Hagakure was something I thought about. If she got grabbed, who would know? So I put her in the place that could allow her to get caught, but I decided she needed to play some Metal Gear Solid and be useful. Shame our invisible girl gets so overlooked in the manga. So she caught the person who was signal jamming, giving her some much needed usefulness. And yes, I did look up what the number for the police in Japan was. I was originally going to find like a child's nursery rhyme that she could use, but I don't speak Japanese, so it was difficult to sift through the internet for it. So I hope people understood and didn't think I was insane. Tsu had mentioned that if she was in the conflagration zone that would be bad for her, so I decided she ended up there, but then I realized she would die if she didn't have a way to beat the heat, since I assumed more heat-related villains were placed there. So I thought whose quirk would be misinterpreted as weak in fire. Todoroki. It seemed obvious for the villains. Send the ice power to the fire area. Easy win. But remembering the tournament arc, that's more like a mana system, and the heat allows him to thaw naturally, so he doesn't have to use his own fire powers, keeping with his promise. Tsuyu's and Todoroki's interactions were because I thought it was cute Sumi. I decided that Bakugo and Yaoyorozu needed someone on one time to talk, so I put them together and brought out some dialogue. I hope it fits with the characterization. I wanted Midoriya, Ida, and Uraraka to do something together, so I put them in the place they couldn't do their best. Low visibility, low traction, high winds mess with objects floating. Then I watched way too much Super Mario Maker and decided clearly Izuku can use his cape to fly too. He just needs to be lighter, which is where Uraraka comes in, and some sort of propulsion to steer, which is where Ida worked out. The mountain zone was just a way for the students to be more aware of what's going on earlier, since the teachers wouldn't have told them jack shit, which will be fun later. The entrance in canon seemed weird that no villains got dropped off there for the kids to deal with besides Kurogyri, so I put some mooks for them to fight. Finally, the Central Plaza. I again thought that if they wanted to stop Izawa dropping some of his students in with him, meant he had to protect them, but I also wanted some action, so I chose Sato and Ijiro, who I think did an excellent job until they fought Nomu. Is it Nomu or the Nomu? Wasn't entirely sure, so I just went with currently since that's the only one they have. It's a pronoun. Later they just become nouns. Who was hyped for Izuku v Nomu? Show of hands. I hope I made the fight believable. Izuku strong but not overpowered. He needed help to win, but not All Might. So I figured out how believable is it for the kids to do this. So I needed someone to be able to weaken the thing first, which since Midoriya trained with All Might he could land some blows early on to the creature, slowing it down slightly. So let me know what you guys thought about that. The after party, did you like how All Might and Izuku interacted? Very interesting to me. The teens watching the footage like a movie was more a way to make sure all characters that I may potentially use are kept up on current events. I also like to do characters react to things parts. So how would everyone who didn't go think about what those who did went through? Please tell me if I fucked up the confession between our three lovebirds. I hope it's believable, kind of hot and ready for more. The infirmary scene was very fun, showing Bakugo and Kirishima became friends. The teachers are too sneaky. Shigaraki. Okay, so I hoped I kept the gamer thing he had going well, and it was in canon with how he would react to these differences. So let me know if you like whiny manchild. I could go with deranged lunatic if you guys want. Now review. Blaze 1992. Yup, their teens some scary movies scare adults. So why shouldn't that scare superpowered teenagers? Also, it's based on an urban legend they had heard about, kind of heavy-handed with who the blood slasher is, but I think it foreshadows nicely. Anime trash pile. The big three might be brought in early, almost definitely. Lamarck's Momo was late because she wanted Izuku and Itsuka to spend some time together since she gets to see him all during 1A classes. Not a lot of reviews, but I'm not discouraged. So for those of you who voted in the poll, Harry Potter and the Broken Child is up for those who aren't aware I started that. Check it out. Same rule applies there as here. Leave brutal reviews. This is your 12th favorite writer. Until next time. Chapter 14, Aftermath Affection. The next morning, Izuku wearily crawled out of his bed and made his way to the boys' communal bathroom, towel and toothbrush in hand. He had just stepped up to the counter when a hand grabbed him and pushed him against a wall. Striking his head against the tiled walls is an effective way to wake up and piss him off as well. So, the great hero emerges. Monoma laughed at Izuku as he rubbed the back of his head. Seriously, Midoriya groaned. It's like 5 in the morning, don't you have anything better to do than jump me in the shower? Monoma paced back and forth. Oh, your two hussies not enough for you. Need a man to come into your little fuckfest too? Why is he such a dick? Izuku pondered. Dude, if you want to talk trash about me, fine. I'm used to that, but leave them out of this, he said, standing up for his new girlfriends. I'll talk trash about anyone I want to, especially some kid who wasn't good enough to prevent his friends from getting hurt yesterday. Monoma mocked. If I was at the USJ, I could have stopped that in a minute or two. Izuku scoffed. Everyone was trying their hardest. What could Monoma have done to end it sooner? Really, how? Monoma dragged his index finger along the countertop before poking Izuku in the chest. My quirk can copy the quirk of anyone I touch. I could have gotten the Shadow Man or even the big monster and took care of it all myself. He pressed hard, digging his nail into the fabric of Izuku's shirt. So, Izuku shot back. You would have had to touch them to do it, and most of us got split up before anyone could do anything. He defended the actions of everyone from yesterday. But just because the rest of 1A uses flashy powers doesn't make you better than us. Monoma circled Izuku. I watched that video the Invisibit showed yesterday. Most of you did nothing. All Might got there just as you were finishing up with Big Guy. He would have handled it. Monoma paced over to the door. But no, you had to try and be the hero. Had to have the spotlight to make yourself look better. Monoma strolled out of the room, leaving a frustrated Midoriya. Now let's see what your powers do, Green Bean. Monoma cackled. Grr. Who does he think he is? Izuku muttered to himself as he scrubbed himself down in the shower. I wish I was more like Kachin. He wouldn't have tolerated even a second of that. He rubbed his scalp clean. He would have beat up that jerk for even touching him. Izuku turned off the water and dressed before storming out of the bathroom. As Izuku stood at the stove with multiple pans cooking eggs, bacon, grits, and sausage, he was so absorbed in his own anger that he didn't hear the door open behind him or the two people who had snuck up on him. Hello, boyfriend. Momo and Itsuka cheered before planting over-exaggerated kisses on his cheeks, causing him to leap a foot in the air with a shriek. Patting himself on his chest to get his heart rate down, Izuku looked into the grinning faces of his new paramours. Did you really have to scare me like that? He whined. Itsuka hopped up on the counter and plucked a cooked sausage link, then smirked evilly. No, but I didn't have to do this either, as she pretended to fillet the cooked meat, while planting kisses seductively on her food. Izuku blushed harshly as he couldn't make eye contact and began a staring contest with his feet. Momo laughed at the absurdity of the actions. Why were you so deep in thought? I know breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but I didn't think it was the most interesting, she asked. Izuku sighed. It was this morning. That jerk was saying mean things about you girls again, and I really wanted to hit him, he confessed. You didn't though, right? Itsuka asked. Midoriya shook his head. No, but he's just... Before he let out a frustrated growl. It's not the first time. Wait, is this the same guy who was giving you trouble in the locker room last week? Momo questioned. She waited for Midoriya to nod. Yeah, how do you girls know about that? Izuku wondered. Jiro-san put her earphone jacks into the locker room walls and gave us the play-by-play on the other side, Itsuka teased. We heard everything. Midoriya blushed at the idea that the girls had been listening in on their guy talk. Don't be shy. All the girls liked what you had to say. Momo patted him on the head. It was very gallant of you to try and defend our honor. Itsuka interrupted. But now it's our turn. Give us a name and we ladies will have a meeting if you will. Izuku waved his arms defensively. It's not a big deal. I'll take care of it. Both girls folded their arms under their chests. Nope. It is a big deal because he's harassing you. Momo softly said. Itsuka was much more forceful. Yeah. All the girls heard what he was saying and are none too pleased with him. So, make it easier on yourself and talk. Before she crossed over and stood behind him, which made Izuku very nervous. What if I don't? He gulped. Momo strode up to the sweating boy. Easy. We have ways of making you talk, as she took a step forward, making him walk back into Itsuka's waiting arms. Izuku realized he had no way out. If you're a good boy, we'll reward you. Momo said with a sultry tone. Ooh, and if you're naughty, we'll reward you extra hard. Itsuka added with a lust-filled tone, squeezing him tight against her body. Izuku stammered. He was in between a rock and a hard place, and by rock he meant the soft mounds pressing into his back and the hard place in his pants. He didn't want to snitch. After years of abuse from Bakugo, and never telling anyone until recently, he had developed a habit of expecting no one to help him out of situations that he found himself in. But now things are different. Suddenly feeling Momo's large breasts touching his own chest. Very different, hugely different. He began sweating bullets, before he couldn't take the interrogation any longer. Monoma! It was Monoma! He half squeaked, half shouted. He was quickly let go and both girls planted a deep kiss on his lips. Good boy. Now you just let us deal with this, Itsuka said before both girls left the kitchen, to do who knows what. Izuku, weak at the knees, slumped to the floor and did everything he could to steady his breath. That was really dangerous, he gasped. How the hell do I defend against that? Before the smell of burning meat reminded him that he has to tend to the food. The 1A classroom was noisy as the students chattered while they waited for their homeroom teacher to greet them. When the door slid open and the 4 classmates that ended up in the infirmary for the night due to their injuries stepped in, the class got silent. Bakugo growled, Any of you extras got something to say? Before Mina jumped out of her chair and dived into the group of boys and tried to pull them into a giant hug. Hey, get the fuck off me. I'm so happy you guys are okay, Mina all but cried. That fight was incredible and terrifying. A few more students moved to the front of the class. Yeah, guys, watching you go up against that thing was intense. Better than any action movie I've seen, Shoji stated. I'm considering selling bootleg copies of that fight. Hagakure gasped. When did you get a copy of that? Shoji's little mouth smirked. When you weren't looking, I extended my arm to your computer to email it to myself. The invisible girl lightly slapped the boy's arm. Rude. Also, that's evidence. I don't think the teachers would like it if it was posted online. While she scolded Shoji, Midoriya crept up to an annoyed Bakugo. Hey, Kachin, how's? Waving his arms around. You know? Tisich fine. Old lady healed up my ribs, good as new. Bakugo sneered. I'm not weak like you, Deku. Midoriya laughed at his friend's deflective nature. That's good. I'm just glad you're okay. Kirishima noticed the conversation and threw his arm over Bakugo's shoulder. Nah, dude. Next time I'm going to take it down. Whatever shitty hair. I'll take out the next 100 before you get a chance. Bakugo barked at his new friend before the two of them went to take a seat. They sure are a lively bunch, Karo. Tsuyu pondered, placing the tip of her index finger under her chin. Yeah, too lively. Sit down and shut up, or you'll all get detention. Aizawa ordered his class, having entered unnoticed while the students caught up with each other. Aizawa's arm was in a sling, and he had some new scratches on his face. He placed his large stack of folders and took stock of the students in the room before resting his gaze on Izuku for a moment longer than the others. Firstly, I would like to congratulate you all for surviving yesterday's ordeal. It was the real deal and you all performed adequately. It was the highest praise he had ever given a student before. As a result, the students reveled in it before his gaze hardened. However, some of you, as he made eye contact with Midoriya, thought to disobey my orders and joined in the fight instead of trying to leave. I was the pro. You all were not even sidekicks. You were supposed to listen to my instructions. Izuku stood up, but Aizawa-sensei, I couldn't. He tried to defend himself before a piece of chalk nailed him between the eyes. Yes, you absolutely could have. The homeroom teacher glared. There are times when you must learn to run away, instead of charging head first and like you seem to have made a habit of. Sighing, Aizawa turned to the board. However, there are times when a great sacrifice must be made, and I am proud that some of you would not hesitate to make that if it meant saving others. That is what it means to be a hero, the ability to give your all for others, not the powers, not the costumes, not the villains. It's seeing something you can do to help and doing it, no matter the consequences. The door to the classroom opened, yes, which is why we are pushing forward the sports festival a few weeks. Nedzu, the principal, said as he walked into the room. Kirishima shouted, the UA Sports Festival. No way. Obviously excited. Some of the students looked more confused while others looked positively giddy. Yes, Kirishima-san. The principal went up to the blackboard and pulled out a folding stepladder so that he could reach the chalk and drew the words. Every year we hold a tournament for all of the students. Normally it occurs in the second or third month of the semester, give or take for holidays and such, but after the events at the USJ, we, Nedzu muttered, and by we, I mean the board of directors, before returning to his normal volume. Want to show that we are as strong if not stronger because of the incident yesterday, so it has been decided that in 2 weeks the festival will be held. Nedzu sighed, which means I have to pay premium prices to get everything set up in that time and create the events for the students. Really glad I didn't spend all the money on giant robots from the military, though I do still have some from the previous years. Maybe I can write that off as an expense. The students began excitedly chatting among themselves about what the festival could do for them and their future careers. First though, brats, Aizawa shouted. You have your classes until then. As the students progressed through the day, there was an air of excitement that seemed to spill over during the lunch period. Students from all departments were mingling together after receiving the news. Izuku was picking at his food when he suddenly felt sandwiched, both of his new, official girlfriends now taking one of his sides. Oh, hey Momo-chan, it's Suka-chan. Hey Izuku-en, they said in unison, before laughing at his blush. So what do you think of the festival? He asked the girls. It seems like a good way to show off what you got for the pros. Itsuka said. But it does let everyone know what you can and can't do, Momo added. I wouldn't be surprised if villains watched every year to see what heroes end up on the streets next. Wow, that's a scary thought, Yarozu-san, said Sato as he sat down. Sorry for intruding. I just wanted to say thanks for catching me yesterday. That fall would not have been fun. Izuku began stammering. It's no problem, Sato-san. I just did what I always do. That's pretty manly, dude, said a boy with silver hair. I'm Tetsu. He introduced himself while sticking out his hand. Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya greeted him while shaking his hand. Momo Yaoyorozu. She too introduced herself. Hello, Tetsu-san. Itsuka greeted her classmate, making Sato laugh. What's funny? She asked. Sato replied, I just think it's funny. You never know if you're saying his given name or his family name when you talk to him. Tetsu began laughing too. No, I guess you really don't. Izuku got a chuckle out of the humor before he saw movement in the corner of his eye. Oh, Shinso-san, come join us. He waved to the purple-haired boy. Maybe another time. Hitoshi sighed out as he walked out of the cafeteria to parts unknown. Man, I cannot get a read on that guy, Sato said. I think that's the most words he's said to one of us since class started a week ago. What's up with that, though? Itsuka questioned. Izuku-kun is the sweetest boy in the world. Why would Shinso-san not want to join us? Have we offended him in some way? Momo shook her head. I think it's his quirk. Noticing all eyes on her now, she explained further. Everyone's quirk that has an activation know what actions that cause it to activate and normally control themselves to not do so. So in doing so, we learn to avoid doing certain movements. Tetsu, who was unfamiliar with most of the 1A students, asked, Well, what's his quirk then? Brainwashing, Momo quietly said. If you respond to him then, he can put you under his control, make you do things. Dude, that sounds like a villain, Tetsu started to say. He's not a villain, Izuku shouted. Suddenly, everyone's eyes were on him. He has an amazing quirk, and just like anyone could hurt people with it. But he's here. As he pointed around the room, he wants to help people. He wants to do good. So don't go around saying anyone who wants to help others is a villain just because of their quirk. It's wrong. Tetsu shied away. Sorry, I didn't mean anything by it. Just that it sounds? Then shutting up because of the glare he was getting. I'll apologize to him, I promise. As he gathered up his lunch tray. But it's pretty manly that you would stand up for someone like that. Before walking away, Momo and Itsuka each gave Izuku a hug. That was really sweet of you to stand up for someone who wasn't here to defend them, Hiro-kun. Itsuka teased her boyfriend. When the hero classes went to the respective locker rooms to change for All Might's class, the girls took a quiet approach. Okay, ladies, listen up, Momo called out, catching the attention of the girls as they disrobed. After some interrogation of our sweetie pie Midoriya-kun, she waited for the whistles and hollering to die down. Itsuka-chan and I have determined the identity of the boy who was trash-talking last week. The girls got riled up. Who was it? Ochako asked. Itsuka spoke up. It was Monoma-san, causing the 1B girls to groan that it was now confirmed to be one of theirs who was the jerk. Now we are in preparations for a way to humiliate him, so first we'll need to know who's willing to participate. Before any of the girls could answer the call to action, a voice spoke up. Shut up, bitches, Jiru playfully stated. The guys are talking. As her earphone jacks were planted firmly in the wall, she then began relaying what she heard. So Green Bean finally decided to take the two bimbos off the market finally? Monoma snickered, ignoring the growling from the other boys in the room. They aren't bimbos, Monoma, so back off. Izuku ordered him, already fed up with interacting with the copycat. Monoma strode over and leaned against his locker. Come on, be honest. Are you done picking off the easy ones, or are you going to snatch up a few more? Dude, not manly, called out Kirishima and Tetsu at the same time. I don't think it's manly for Little Green to be too timing on his girls, but if he wanted more, I would suggest Horseface. She's pretty dumb. Should be easy to convince her to do some stuff to you. Monoma sneered. She has those horns, so you would have something to hold on to. Ida stormed over. Seriously, your vulgarity is abhorrent, and the way you speak about the ladies in our class is downright barbaric. I demand you cease at once. His robotic movements making Monoma laugh. Fine, you win. I won't talk to you about bestiality anymore. Since you don't seem to be interested, guess that also means you don't want the toad, warts and all. Monoma cackled. Before noticing something, the temperature was fluctuating wildly in the room. Oh, did I make the overrated thermostat mad? What, you want to see if she turns into a prince if you kiss her big lips hard enough? What is wrong with you? Izuku shouted. Why are you trying to piss everyone off? What does that possibly get you? It gets you pissed off, you wizard wannabe. Monoma laughed in Izuku's face. Why don't you just use those scarves to make a noose and haunt? Hey Dixit, came a calm voice. What do you want, Cutter? Monoma replied. Stuff yourself in that locker, said the voice from across the room. The guys watched as Monoma cleared out the locker in front of him and then fit his body in before closing the door. Haha, nice, shouted Kaminari before he looked around the room. Anyone got a way to seal that shut? Zero stepped up. I got my tape. It'll hold for a while. Before a boy with a blue headband stepped up. No, dude, I got this. as he placed his hands on the locker door and the locker next to it, using his quirk to bond them together at the atomic level. Someone will probably have to let him out later. As some of the boys laughed as they exited the changing room, the girls on the other side of the wall cheered. And now we just need to convince them not to let him out and he'll be easy pickings for us later tonight, Mina said deviously. Shouldn't be too hard. Just tell the boys how happy we are about standing up to that jerk and they'll do pretty much anything we ask of them. The surprising manipulative words coming from the usually noble Ibara Shiozaki. Wow, Karo. Didn't think you could be this vindictive? Tsuyu croaked, a tinge of pink dusting her cheeks from hearing that someone with a temperature-related quirk over there was upset because she was being made fun of. 'Tis for justice, the ivy-haired girl responded. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. It's in the Bible. Reiko Yanagi quietly muttered, pretty sure it's not, but whatever, vengeance and whatnot. Before letting out a sigh, we're taking a long time again and the boys are going to start weird rumors about what we get up to. As the now 39 students lined up, All Might passed by and did a head count. We're missing a student. Some of the guys looked nervous, but a voice rang out. Omonoma-san said he was going to Recovery Girls. Eyes turning to Ochako, who spoke up. He said his lunch made him sick, and he would be gone for today. Suddenly the girls caught on to the lie. Yeah, and he wanted to make sure he had a lot of makeup work, so he doesn't fall behind in your very educational class, Momo added. Pony shouted from the back. Yeah, he's sorry, but he's got like exploding diarrhea and vomiting. He's really gross. Her over-the-top illness making more than a few students chuckle. Well, it's very important to make sure one doesn't fall behind in class, lapping up the praise. All Might was used to hearing it for his hero work, but the other teachers sort of hazed him for being so new to teaching and was basking that after a week the students liked him. And it's so good that his classmates like him so much they look out for their friends. It warms my hero heart to see such good attitudes. Because of the odd numbers, All Might had paired them off into different sized groups, of their own choosing to work on one-on-one sparring. Since he wanted the students to be ready for the big finale at the end of the sports festival, he figured as long as everyone was doing it, it would lead to more interesting fights since they would somewhat know what to expect. All Might looked around the room, his gaze falling on various groups. Kirishima and Bakugo were just sparring, really just punching and blowing things up, but they looked happy enough. Ojiro and Kendo were practicing martial arts styles with each other. Azui and Tokoroki were facing off, him trying to trap the agile girl and her jumping and parkouring around his ice. He could have sworn that the tongue slaps she would land were closer to his cheek than they were his shoulder, but he just shrugged it off. Momo and Izuku were practicing their quirks, Momo by making props and tools for Izuku, and him essentially putting on a show for her. So I take it the Jairu-san was listening in on us again? Momo got an evil gleam in her eyes. Oh, you better believe it, green bean, she teased. So you just tell the guys to leave him be and us girls will be sure to take care of him for you. Before she snuck up and pecked him on the nose, making him drop the bowling pins he was juggling. I do have to ask, why you needed me to make the box yesterday? Couldn't you have pulled it out of your sleeve? Yes and no, he answered. I can't really just pull whatever I want out of my sleeves. I would have to either put it there, like my book. He demonstrated as he pulled it out of his sleeve, before putting it back before a certain bomb boy noticed. Or I have to take it from somewhere else, which can cause problems. And it's difficult to do large-scale tricks like that. Takes a bunch of magic to pull off. Really tires me out, and I needed my all for that fight. Momo puzzled out his explanation. So my quirk is really helpful to yours because I can make the props you need? Izuku scratched his cheek. Well, yes, but your quirk is amazing for everyone's. It's one of the best quirks I've ever seen, let alone heard of. Even All Might's is just punching stuff. Shocking the girl for a slightly disparaging remark about his personal hero. Someone's fishing for a reward, she sauntered over to Izuku. Tell me again, is my quirk cooler than All Might's? She leaned over him. Yeah, he answered nervously. Am I cooler than All Might? She leaned into him, turning the boy beet red. Yes, ma'am. He began sweating. Am I hotter than All Might? Clicking her tongue at the end of the sentence, as she leaned up to his ear to whisper that last question. Oh, dear God, yes, he shouted, before falling to his knees. Suddenly, everyone in the gym was watching the two teens, before Itsuka shouted. Are we teasing the boy toy now? causing more than a few students to giggle about how open they were being about their relationship. If so, I want to switch. It's my turn to transform him into a tomato. Before bowing to Ojiro and shuffling over Izuku and pulling him up into her chest and making his squirm to get free. True, I do need to work on my physical form as well. Momo laughed as she walked away. Don't break him too much. Izuku wheezing at the heat. All Might help. He desperately begged his mentor, friend, and teacher. All Might looked solemnly at him. Remember a certain boy who threw a certain office worker under the bus yesterday? Izuku slowly nodded. Well, payback's a bitch, young Midoriya. Before he boisterously laughed and walked away. See, even the number one will run away from this. Itsuka teased by running her hands over her body, before putting Izuku into a fighting position. The rest of the class Izuku spent trying his hardest to focus on fighting, but Itsuka would regularly strike a sexy pose for him to keep him on his toes. The other boys were relentless in teasing him. In good nature, they were happy for him, that he found what seemed like every teenage boy's dream. Two busty beautiful babes to be his girlfriends. Izuku took a very long shower after class. Hey, can I ask you something? A head of red hair asked a soot-covered girl. Sure thing, oh, bestest buddy? The girl said, placing a pair of goggles on her head. If I wanted to talk to someone, how would I go about doing that? He questioned the girl. She scoffed. Talk to someone, that's easy. Just say how much you want to make babies with them, and that gets all the guys I know talking to me about anything. Before she turned a piece of welded metal in her hands. I, don't think that's going to work. Baby making, it's really going to happen. He replied. Well, you could just say you want to hear the sound of pounding when near him. She offered. The boy covered his face in his hands. I don't think you understand what you're saying, but thanks anyway. As he ran out of the workshop. And I don't think you understand how obviously right I am. Before soldering a piece of metal to a tube. That night in the locker room, the sound of a door creaking open alerted Monoma that he wasn't alone any longer. Hello? Anyone please, let me out? So we heard you like to pick on people and call us girls hussies, is that right? As the sound of metal melting away was the only sound he could hear besides his own breathing. Please, have mercy, he begged. No, a feminine voice answered. The students in the doors swore that they could hear screams on the winds, but thought it was just the new building settling. Author's notes. I'm back. Here it is, the aftermath. Going to do some slow building as the characters interact. I decided that All Might isn't cheating when it comes to this one-on-one training. He just thinks it would make for a better show if the students better understood how to handle the different quirks in their year. I hope I made you hate Monoma more. If not, tough. It was rough for me to come up with an insult for Tsuyu. She's my waifu, best girl in the series. I am going to be honest, I'm holding off using some of the 1B until the current manga arc is finished, since we will get to see so many of the quirks that never got displayed used. Manga Fukudashi might be the coolest fucking dude in the school. That power is wicked. Going to love using the 1B during the sports festival. So sorry about the delay, but I really want to see some of the other quirks. Review. Blaze 1992. Probably, yeah, I could have written his magic to do that, but I feel that makes him too strong and leaves me with the option to just say, of course he had an RPG, 7 up his sleeves, fuck you muscular. So limiting his powers requires me to come up with creative solutions to how he can solve a problem as opposed to just having everything on hand. Sonic Max. Sort of. Izuku with One for All is way stronger and will be when he masters using the literal best quirk, but this Izuku has much more control over his magic, so it allows him to be on a higher level earlier. Guessed. Yup, totally got that wrong, my bad. I had the characters' names up the entire time, and I don't know how I missed calling him Ijiro the entire time. Guessed. I do like the idea of magician assistants, but I do want both girls to also be their own heroes, not just his sidekicks. Lord Mentat. Maybe not Deadly Tiger, but I have plans, just not sure if I want the same matchups or not. Wouldn't make sense to have them with the changes I'm going to be making, but we'll see who he ends up against. As to the people who think the UA staff are accusing our boy of being a spy, they aren't, but it is pretty suspicious that right now the only lead they have on the League of Villains is the paper trail following Izuku's dad. So they need to follow that thread, and as a result it means keeping an eye on the boy. Nothing out of the ordinary for any organization worrying about a spy. Remnant Sage. I'm glad you enjoyed the humor, I try. I did say that the villains are probably going to watch, so the question I am mulling over is a certain love quirk user takes an interest in a magician as opposed to a ringleader. Who knows how heroic Izuku could be? Answer, very. But that's still up in the air. Does Izuku need a lowly sidekick? What about a scared little girl who happens to catch something on TV? What is the great and not hypocritical Stain doing? Will Endeavor lose his pants? Find out later. Brutal reviews. You know the drill. Going to work on Date Night Part 2 and some of my other deranged machinations I posted. Check those out if you like my style, or hate my style. I change it up in the stories I write. I'm weird like that. Chapter 15, Date Night Part 2. As the taxi pulled up to the dance club, it was a classic, European-style building for the more refined and mature couple. It played soft and slow music for romance. At least that is what Toshinori thought it was supposed to. When they pulled up, for whatever reason, lasers and fog machines were at the entrance, and bright flashing lights and a thumping bass could be heard even from the shut doors. "Yamada-san, why?" he whispered out. Inko looked around the place. A bunch of young couples, groups of scantily clad girls and teams of young hungry men were lined up outside, while a large four-armed bouncer with a toothy mouth stood outside checking IDs. Yagi-san, I thought this was a dance club, not a nightclub," she questioned him. "Well, I, have never actually been here. I got a recommendation from a co-worker." He tugged at his collar. He turned to the taxi driver. "Are you sure this is the right place?" The driver scoffed. "Course it is. The slow and steady. It's the latest and greatest hookup spot if you're looking for an easy lay. Booze is cheap, music is loud, and women are loose." The driver waved his hands in a circle. "It's ironically named, you know, like that new restaurant across town." Toshinori suddenly sweat. What was the, restaurant's name, if you recall? But before he could hear the answer, Inko grabbed his elbow, pulling him away. "Come on, Yagi-san. We're at the right spot. Let's give it a try. Something new," Inko said, controlling her nervousness. "I've never done something like this, and it's kind of scary, but if my baby can follow his dreams, I can manage one night out of my comfort zone." As the two of them walked up to the bouncer, the young people in line laughed at the near middle-aged woman and her skeletal-looking date. "Hey, I didn't know they let people out of retirement for this," a voice rang out from the back. Inko blushed in embarrassment at the heckling, thinking to herself that this might have been a bad idea, until a voice with a far more commanding tone spoke up. "Hey, this is a woman you are speaking to. Have some dignity," Toshinori said with his normal all-might cadence. The authority that he was speaking with at that moment was one that he used when commanding a scene, when catching the attention of heroes, villains, and civilians alike. Sorry, Mamayam." The voice apologized. Toshinori nodded his head sharply and offered Inko his elbow. "Why, thank you, Yagi-san." She gratefully accepted. When they reached the bouncer, he looked them over and snarled. She got nervous. She had expected a reservation, but it looked like it might be a long wait to get into the club. But she was surprised when Toshinori presented a card to the bouncer, who took one look at it, then stepped aside. "Please, enjoy yourselves this evening, as VIP of the Slow and Steady." As the couple swept past him and entered the darkened room, "Wow, this place is loud," was the only thing on both the adults' minds as they took in their surroundings. Men and women were jumping, bumping, and grinding on the dance floor to music that sounded like a keyboard in a blender. Loud, cackling women were at the bar drinking fluorescent-colored drink, while guys awkwardly flirted with them. "So, do you want to dance?" Toshinori asked, as he noticed that his suit and her dress were far above the expected attire at this establishment. Inko looked over to him and nervously nodded. "Yeah, it's what we came here for, isn't it?" Outside the club, a pink girl and sat at a table sipping a coffee while a floating box of Pocky was being devoured next to her. "Come in, Hat Trick, over." "This is Hat Trick. What's the problem, over?" Izuku responded. "Turns out you got played, over."
Mina ansvared.
Izuku, who was making his way downtown, paused. "What happened?" Hearing only silence in return. "Well, anyone?" Hagakure chimed in, giggling. "You didn't say, over," running his hand down his face. "Fine. What happened, over?" "The dance club wasn't really a dance club, over," Mina told him. Izuku quickened his pace. "And that means what, over?" He began regretting not eliminating All Might when he had the chance. "It's a nightclub over roar," Hagakure sang to him. Izuku growled in response. "I knew it, that devious bastard. Oh, when I get my hands on him. And why is Ghost acting loopy over?" Hagakure gasped at the accusation, but Mina put a stop to her, responding. "She has been eating sweets non-stop all day. She's a bundle of energy, and we'll need a way to bleed that off before she blows our cover over." "What can you see of the targets over?" Izuku said as he hopped over a fence. "Zilch, they went inside. Over," Mina told the boy. Izuku's frustration rose. "Can you get in a better position? Over?" Mina looked at her surroundings before responding. "Not unless we go in, and that's a pretty big risk. Over." Izuku weighed his options. He needed more intel. He needed eyes on his mom, but it would risk the entire operation if they got seen. His mom might not recognize his classmates, but even to someone like All Might, Ishido sticks out like a 15-year-old neon pink teenager. Grunting his reply, "Fine, go in. Don't make contact unless his hands wander. That might burn off some of Ghost's energy. Over." Hagakure cheered, "Who? Let's party," before she grabbed Mina and took off across the street. The line had cleared up, so Mina and Toru didn't have to wait long. The bouncer eyed them up. In a society where people's appearances can be so drastic, just their features alone isn't enough to determine age anymore. So the government-issued IDs were very specific, impossible to cheat. Or they should have been, had Mina and Toru not blackmailed a certain buxom girlfriend of their resident magician to use her quirk to make IDs that were identical down to their atomic structure. They did swear to only use it to get into clubs and stuff, and they wouldn't drink or anything like that. But the photo of Momo dressed up in a bunny girl costume and practicing in a mirror to be Izuku's sexy assistant was enough to buy silence. After using an issued scanner to confirm authenticity, the bouncer relented and let the two girls who he was pretty sure were underage in. "Oh, my super crap. This place is bumpin'," Mina shouted as Toru pulled her onto the dance floor. "Let's tear this shit up," as Hagakure began throwing herself around the room with reckless abandon, narrowly missing taking out Inko as she and Tashinori awkwardly moved their bodies to the music. "This is fun," Inko gave a smirk. She really was having fun. Not being the only person who couldn't dance certainly helped. Despite how different and alien the atmosphere was to him, he had to agree it was liberating to not be All Might for a while, something he hadn't really done in a long time. "I have to agree, Midoriya-san," as he started to get into the groove of the music, until he halted in fear. The music turned low. Now to announce a special guest DJ, the host of the free Friday night nonstop broadcast, Put Your Hands Up Radio. We are proud to host the Sultan of Sound, Pro Hero Present ICC. The atmosphere in the room cranked up to a rolling cheer. "Oh shit, Mina," scrambled to the bathroom. "Fuck, shit, damn it. Hat trick, major problem, over." Izuku skidded to a halt. "What chemistry, over?" "Present Mike is here. What do I do? He'll see me from up in the booth if he looks around, over." Mina shouted, covering her ear to fake a phone call. Okay, shit, maybe he won't see you, over." Izuku reasoned. "Don't give me that. I am the only pink person in this building. There is no way he doesn't see me," Mina retorted. "Why is he here, over?" Izuku recalled all the knowledge about heroes he acquired over the years. Present Mike DJs on the weekends when he has free time. It could be a coincidence, over. Well, it's a bloody convenient coincidence then, over. "Bitch, where did you go?" Toru shouted as she stuck her head in the bathroom. "There you are. Oh gosh. Did you see our teacher out there? He's dancing in the DJ booth. He's so weird. We need to think of something. We didn't plan on Present Mike being here." Mina told Toru. "Can't we just cause an accident?" She shrugged her invisible shoulders. Mina gasped in response. "You want to kill Present Mike?" "What, no. We just knock some stuff over, and they shut down for a bit to clean up, and then we slip out." Toru slapped her friend's arm. "Killing him is plan C, silly." Before she started stripping and leaving her clothes on the bathroom floor. "Woo, naked time!" she screamed as she made her way across the dance floor. "Toru, you're joking about that plan C, right? Toru?" Mina tapped her comm again. "Okay, so if it goes well, I'll have an escape route over. Izuku sighed. And if it doesn't go well over?
Toru suggested Homizide.
She replied sheepishly. Izuku threw his hands up. Fine, just as long as she cleans up, going with the joke. She's not serious though, is she, over? He nervously asked. She's had a lot of sugar. I'm not sure, over. As Mina bit her lip in anxiety. Back on the dance floor after going for a few minutes, Toshinori was sweating under his collar. Inko picked up the dancing quickly, starting to mimic the younger ladies, which meant that she was grinding her body on his. Give me strength, as he struggled to keep his hands to himself. Come on, Yagi-san, dance like these younger men. Show them age is just a number. As she laughed to herself while she wiggled her sizable posterior. Toshinori looked around and concluded that the dance the young men were doing was nothing more than a clothed version of the horizontal tango. I think maybe I should, as Present Mike became his favorite person that night, for a moment. Then he vowed to have Power Loader modify his speakers to only play in Chipmunk. The music began to fade. All right, party people, now I got a request from a dear friend of mine. He brought his lady out to show her a good time. So let's slow it down. He pulled dials, and the loud electronic music faded to a quiet and quite intimate song. Then the spotlight lit up Inko and Toshinori. Inko squealed in delight and pressed herself dangerously close to Toshinori's body while she began to rock him back and forth. Aw, aren't they a cute couple, everyone? Let's hope he can keep up with her. All night long. Before the volume of the music rose. Then Toshinori almost spit up blood when he heard the lyrics. I want to make you scream. I want to hear you beg. Go all night long. Just you and me in bed. Toshinori looked around the room as other couples began to dry hump each other and take deep, breath-stealing kisses with their partners. Oh, that looks fun. You want to try? She teased her date, standing on the tips of her toes, his lips almost gracing his own. All Might was saved from answering as a fire broke out in the corner of the club suddenly. His instincts pulled Inko tightly to his body, and he flung them both to the wall and pressed her against it, shielding her from the stampeding dancers who rushed for the exits. Then the fire suppressant system kicked in, drenching the pair as Toshinori pulled his coat above Inko to cover her from most of the water. In the ensuing chaos, he missed the sensation of an invisible person bumping herself against him for a moment as Hagakure snuck past the two adults. As soon as the invisible girl stepped out, a pink hand grabbed her by the mouth and dragged her into an alley. Are you out of your mind? Mina whisper screamed. You set the building on fire. Well, it worked, didn't it? Toru laughed a response. Arson is not an answer. Mina stomped around. Hat trick. The club cleared out. Turns out Ghost is a bit of a firebug and her intake of sugar needs to be monitored. Over. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life as the rest of the team who had been quiet weighed in. Hagakure-san, destruction of property is a felony. You should be ashamed of yourself, as Ida scolded his classmate. Toru-chan knew. Don't burn things. People could get hurt. Yururika cried out. Bwahaha, that's fucking hilarious. Burn some more shit. Bakugo laughed manically. Shit. Fucking damn it. Okay, fine. We can work with this. Just, we have to complete the mission. Punishments can come after the job's done, Izuku reasoned, this already pressing his limits of tolerance. Where are they headed now? Over? Ida broke out of his rant on the various ways that stunt could have ended poorly. They took the taxi and are headed to the restaurant. Over. Okay, fine. Speed freak. Maintain your tail. Chemistry. Get Ghost some decaf or insulin or something to bring her down. We don't need anyone getting hurt. Floater. Big Bang. You in position? Over? Yes, Dekakuen. I mean hat trick. Over, Yururika responded. Of course, you fucking loser. Sorry. Hat trick. Over, Bakugo snickered into his earpiece. Bakugo-san, don't be mean to Dekakuen, Yururika asked her compatriot. Nah, think we should tell him the Italian restaurant is very much not Italian, he turned and asked her. Ochako got a very devious look in her eyes. No. This will be so much more fun. I mean, Toru-chan got to start a fire. I want to do something more than sit and watch Midoriya-san or Yagi-san get spanked. Atta girl, Bakugo growled. Izuku turned off his path and headed to the intercept point. If the taxi didn't pass by the route, then he would know something else had gone wrong. Uthers notes, Date Night Part 2 is here. Yes, I am stalling until the manga releases a few more chapters to see how all the 1B quirks work. Before I hammer out the sports festival, I just want to see some cool quirks in use. For people who think Izuku is swearing a lot in this story, yup, he is very displeased. The timeline of the date night is that All Might has not revealed his identity to anyone yet, which is questionable to me on the grounds that it seems like every other pro has their name at least able to be looked up, since we have the sports festival as evidence that first years don't have hero names at that point. So I would wonder why people don't know remember the number 1 going to school, unless they didn't broadcast them back when he attended or whatever, but that's just a random thought I had. For the most part, I'm just playing around with the characters because I thought it would be a fun way to show off some different styles. Review. Hollow 7 sorry. It's just to me this is the early stage of a relationship. They are finding boundaries, what each person is okay with. In a healthy relationship this needs to happen early, and you need to be clear with your partner, I'm not ready for this, or that makes me uncomfortable. It's a very flirty time in a relationship as each person is trying to show their affection and considering how inexperienced they are. They imitate what they have seen either from their parents, relatives, friends, or the media, which can sometimes be bad things to do. Well, the media one is always bad. Do not take lifestyle advice from TV or movies, especially actors and actresses. They don't know jack shit about your circumstances and can't give good advice beyond the general try not to fuck up stuff. I will tone down the teasing. On the girls' end, Izuku deserves a chance at revenge, and the girls will tease each other. His confidence is building and really will start to show more in his everyday life after the sports festival. He stood up to Monoma though now. That counts for something. Sonic Max, I don't think that Aiba will be paired with Izuku. 2 girls is plenty for this boy, but I do agree she is a very rare pair. So I might set some time aside and think if I can come up with a story that fits them both. Maybe instead of Izuku going to school with Bakugo and getting treated like shit by everyone, he went to school with Aiba and he got treated like shit because he was quirkless and she was short and so loving of everyone. Then Izuku does his hero thing he likes to do and saves her. So they both try for the UA hero course, maybe him still being quirkless but her love quirk makes him strong as All Might because he's her one true love or something. I'll put that on a back burner and see. That could have a fun situation where she's sort of the female Mineta, but only towards Deku, and they get into a shorty fight over who is best girl. Izuku is included in the girl category for this fight. Guessed I wasn't really hiding that Blood Slasher is Toga, but I did have him murdered by Shigaraki, so I was hinting to the league being active for a while at the time. Valerius Lake sorry, big tricks take him planning them out. He'll have more chances to pull off big stunts when he gets more people to help him out with them, as in, now you see me. It took a crew to pull off those tricks. Izuku by himself won't be able to do it. Midnight Angels say good night. I can justify why the principal doesn't hear that. With 2 hero course, 3 gen ed, 3 support, 3 management assuming 20 students per class, that's 220 students, 660 in all 3 years, give or take. Even if not all of them have quirks or even really strong quirks, I don't see the existence of cameras and microphones in dorm rooms, bathrooms, or locker rooms remaining a secret for more than a few days at best. And all it would take is one student to see it, and suddenly the school is under a scandal. However, in hallways, common areas, and other such public spaces, Nedzu can get away with stating they are for safety and security purposes only and only monitored if an incident occurs. So things that will happen sometimes he is watching, but anything where people would get naked, he wouldn't have equipment set up to surveil. Mrotrax yup, All Might can be a bit bitchy if he wants to. Who would call him out on it?